looks huge.
How about a mohawk?
It's not the
No.
When my son showed up with a
It's just basically.
tongue piercing.
Those things gross me out.
Grossed me out, and before he left,
This is a tiny one.
he was visiting. He had to go to the doctor and take
His
it out.
shoulders, hands are all
I'm
Oh,
okay
he's
with
like
any other
probably
piercing,
my
but earrings, even a nose ring, I don't care. Just like, ugh.
Have the little ring.
Well, that one reminds me of a cow.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cow thing.
She won't part with the money to buy pizza once a week.
Looking under
Think you want to area that?
Mommy, your baby back?
Yeah.
We're ready for you to go. Cosmo was supposed to sign up for tonight. As there's another person I was trying to delay and hope they come, but
Next time I'm driving with her, I have to get gas. I'm going to do that. I'll just say sugar.
Have you called our next president yet? Do you know what I'm talking about?
no.
Nebraska. Voice of reason in the night, Ben Sass from Nebraska. He's a junior senator from Nebraska. He spoke for the first time in the Senate in 2015. And he was basically telling the Senate, we've got to start doing our job. And he's been speaking like that, voice of reason. I ran across him for the first time because I haven't been watching very much of the debates, but he did the lead into the Kavanaugh and told the Senate basically what their job was and stopped passing the buck up to the president, the judicial branch of the president. Kavanaugh is going to be a judge, but it's not his duty to make the laws, not to pass the buck. He said he's a statesman. He's a true statesman, like I have not seen in many years.
I'm curious to hear him then. What's the name again?
Ben Sass, S-A-S-S-E.
Okay.
Junior, Republican senator, conservative. I could still go for it, even though I believe in everything he believes in. I could still go for it.
Yeah, but don't be drug
I'll
pushing.
definitely look him up on your song.
You won't be able to stop watching videos. He's such a statesman. He's such a statesman. I thought Obama was well spoken. Ben Sass is even more so. Yeah, more so. But he's just as prepared as Obama, and he has no
Tim.
First dibs.
Hey, Tim. Okay, that's fine.
I think he feels like he brought the food, and he is also, he doesn't push no people.
Check-ins.
Oh, it is. It's very.
So you just agree to send back what you don't want?
Jerry knows who I'm talking about.
Okay.
He says, by all means,
I'll definitely check him out. Okay, so tonight's topic is violence and the rejection of violence, which is a really interesting thing. It's a bit of a movement to some extent. And I did not know how large this topic was. And in this last week, I've studied my butt off about violence and kind of lots of neuroscience I've read about and studied, and came to the conclusion that was really the right angle. The right angle for this discussion, I think, is to reveal like kind of the truth about our culture here in the United States. And so much so that I ditched the PowerPoint for tonight. Right? So I came to the conclusion, kind of 0 hour, that this discussion is really about looking in the mirror as Americans. Okay? Because no matter what we do, we're in American culture. That's not gonna change. I mean, unless we move out of the country. This has been, American culture has been omnipresent our entire lives, right? Unless we spend a serious amount of time abroad, American culture has been mostly the context by which we all derive our meaning, who we are. We're Americans. So, American culture, if you just kind of zoom out, if you imagine like you're a foreigner or you're from another planet, and you land yourself in the United States.
That's pretty easy for me.
Yeah, indeed. So you land yourself in the United States and you have this just to perfect the fantasy, you speak perfect English and you can communicate and observe and you blend in, you look just like a regular human, et cetera, and so forth. And all you're doing is you're taking in from a kind of a neutral perspective what's going on around you. What you'd see on the street here in the United States of America is you'd see every day people being generous, gracious, courteous, for the most part. You'd see some road rage and stuff like that. You'd also see people holding doors for one another, You'd see people trying to be helpful, polite, and respectful all over the place. You'd see this. And then you'd say, okay, what is the actual, what is the literature of this? What is the written record of this race, or these people, this culture? And so you'd find that on the television transcripts, you look at TV, you look at the different media that we put out, books, writings, books, and the internet, right? Right now, the preponderance of people get their information from the internet. That's reality, by the way. That's scary, but that's reality. And so we've already talked many times about the misinformation online and the internet and all this kind of stuff. But what I think you'd find is you'd find a duopoly. You'd find in the realm of reality where people have that interface, where people are interacting. Yes, you'd find some violence, you'd find crime, you'd find these things, right? Especially if you're a police officer. But as a general citizen, the majority of your life and your time would be enjoying peaceful, non-violent interactions with one another. However, if you turn to our literature, if you turn to our movies and our media and our news stations, and you turn to all these things, you get a completely different perspective. The perspective you get in that territory would be hyper-violence. For example, Game of Thrones. Gratuitous scenes, pregnant women getting stabbed in the belly, and just these horrid, this show, beheadings, wicked diabolical scene after wicked diabolical scene, one of the most highly rated movie series, run by HBO of all time. Okay? I can just give example after example. Most recently in the news, our minds were all focused on pipe bombs being sent by someone in the mail. Right? Yes, please.
Also, a lot of the most popular video games are like violent video games where you're shooting like other people and stuff like
Absolutely.
that. So that's another big thing, especially for kids.
Top grossing games are those such as Call of Duty, which is the very nature of that game is exactly as Megan says, straight gratuitous military style violence.
But even if there wasn't any blood in it, brains just like to move around and dodge things being thrown at them.
Yeah. So also you have Grand Theft Auto series, which is really highly popular. There's very, very violence against civilians, women and children violence is not restricted in that game.
Now hold on, a lot of people play Flappy Bird, and it's kind of, it's another movie game. There's no violence in that. They said it was very addictive.
So what I'm drawing attention
It's not
to...
one of the most popular games. I'm talking about like the top charts, like in this year, like little kids are playing Call of Duty. Like these 7th graders in my school are sitting there like, man, I got like so many kills in Call of Duty last night. Dude, it was so cool. Like I hear that all the time. It's
Not
like,
gonna voice something?
But they don't really believe that they're killing somebody because you come right back.
It's still violence, that's not, it's still there, like that factor. And like my little brother, when he's watching violent stuff, he pretends that he's fighting there and he's like making all these sounds. And then even if he's not watching it, he's still like, pretending like he's fighting. I know that's like the little kid thing, but still, it's still violence.
No, I do it. Not that often, but
Do you think that this would have things like that might have influenced the 2 girls over at Ardrey? Was it, Ardrey was another issue. The 2 girls someplace in the news the last 3 or 4 days that had multiple knives, a pizza cutter. They were going to stab as many of their friends as possible. They were 12-year-olds, I think, in school. Have you heard about that? Just this last week.
I have not heard about that.
You
Like,
think
I
that
thought you
may
were going
have
to be talking about
the gaming?
I don't really know. I don't really know them personally. But
Sorry,
but so it's hard to say like if they like play video games because like I know like a lot of my friends play video games because that's just the people I hang out with. But like a lot of the girls in my school don't really tend to play video games. So I'm not really sure. I would have to like know these people or like get some more information on it.
Well, not those people specifically, but do you feel that it could change a child's mind if they start playing at 7, 8, 9 years old? And by the time they're 12, they're thinking nothing of killing. Do you think it could actually be a game because their minds aren't developed yet?
I think that like because he didn't let me play any of those like super violent games until I was old enough to actually like know that this like the stuff in it. One wasn't real, and that it was just a game. And but
Okay, what games are you playing that I don't know about?
like, remember you let me play Call of Duty, but you wouldn't let me play it when I was like Owen's age. Remember?
Sure, I would let you play.
You would?
I would not.
That's what she said.
But
Do you have any statistics? I mean, I have heard that there have been studies that a child's characters develop by the age of 7. So, also, what I'm talking about, if you have any statistics, is we've had video games and violent video games for a few decades now.
Right.
So we know that there, might be, I know they designate warnings on those teen, mature, whatever, but we know that probably younger kids are playing more violent video games regardless of the warning label. But do you have any statistics? Is there actually, to your point, is there actually any statistics that show with the higher prevalence of video gaming and the children that are doing it, that we actually have an increase in, prison population or murder or
Right. So
correlating it to video gaming?
There's a tremendous amount of statistics in that area. The problem is that the ones that are in that area get overhyped, and then they get so many holes shot in them that they all fall apart. So the basic preponderance of the unique study for this, what I found out, what made sense to me, was that it's a video game playing would be one variable, right? The kind of music you listen to, the kind of people you hang out to. Now that's a really strong influence, and each vector would have a different, scale, a different size. And overall, they create like a net movement of that mind in a more violent direction or in a less violent direction.
But we can say that about a lot of
You can,
behavior.
you can, and so that's why putting out any particular variable, I don't think is very that helpful, and that's why I threw away all the slides filled with statistics, because nothing held up, And then
The fact is that there are no areas of crime in the United States that are not decreasing and have not been decreasing over a fairly stable rate of decrease for 2 to 3 decades, which is the same period of time when there have been video games. So it's hard to draw a causal relationship there that doesn't say no, they're not going to be violent. But at the same time, one of the types of crimes that is on the increase are nationally reported violent crimes. Because violent crimes didn't used to be, if there was a violent crime in the kitchen, chances are I wouldn't hear about it. But I will hear about it now.
Right.
Especially mass murders. There have been mass murders in the United States for 192 years, however long it's been since it's been in the United States. It's not something new that people have been violent, but it's something new that if you're violent enough, wherever you are, you're going to be a national celebrity.
Very true. Right.
To your point, that person who last year, sorry if this subject offends anybody, but when that kid decided to be like that school shooter down in, it was Florida, right?
Sure.
Florida. He posted something online saying how he wanted to be a famous school shooter because he knew that, well, it probably was a very little factor, but he also knew that if he did get caught, he would get the fame, just like we said. And so, but I also don't think it's just like video games. I just said because that was one of the first things that came into my head. A lot of the movies that kids my age and younger watch. Well, I watch like adult movies and like PG-13. That's what I meant. And it's just like a lot of things are violent. My favorite movies are like so violent. Like I like watching the Jurassic Park movie and those people getting devoured by dinos. But so it's like it's on the news, like you said.
Yeah.
It's like everywhere. But
Imagine if you never saw any of that ever in your entire life. Ever. Okay? Never saw anything like that depicted. Your experience was more on the street kind of experience. Like I said, people treating each other with respect, holding doors and stuff like that. This is your everyday life. and you see the occasional fire truck or ambulance go by or something like this, like that's kind of your window into the world, and that's your life experience, and you've never even watched television, and now all of a sudden you're propped down in front of the television and you watch Jurassic Park. You'd likely be shaking, terrified, crying, like you'd be very, very, very disturbed likely if you were to see that for the first time, and that's the first thing you've ever seen like that ever. And what's happened instead is that you've had a steady diet of violence in your whole entire media, your whole life now. And so you can watch Jurassic Park now in a fully desensitized manner and laugh when a human being gets devoured.
You were the one who laughed. I was the one who was sitting there like,
I have also had a much larger diet of violence my whole life. So
he's a monster.
Yeah, so I'm
He probably killed lots of people.
So Ben, sorry, before I do. Go ahead, Ben. Did you have something?
Yeah, so there's this thing called rage rooms. That I haven't been to one. I don't know what they are, but you can pay this business to go beat the crap out of some stuff. And they'll give you some stuff you're allowed to break to the bath or whatever. And you take the rage out on that, and there'll be peaceful after. And video games might be similar. And since I'm not sure it means this, but since the crime rate seems to be going down, maybe the more video games people play, the more people they have to kill outside the video game.
Well, there's
the less
violence
people.
and there's fantasy, because Game of Thrones tends to be more a fantasy type of program. I've never seen it, but it's the same with like Jurassic Park. Dinosaurs don't exist. We know that if I'm a rational being, I'm going to go out there and know that there's not a velociraptor waiting to kill me. So there's that element when we talk about a larger genre of violence, because part of it is fantasy. And video games, I mean, a lot of that is fantasy play as well. So one of those variables, you're talking about mental health as well, is the people's ability to make those rational distinctions between this is a movie, this is fake, this is not how we treat people, or, I know I'm playing a video game and I'm going to, be in the real world when I'm done playing it, whatever.
Right. So we have a common reaction to things when we see them. They're the most potent if we see them in reality. If you're on the street and you see somebody come up to somebody else, stab somebody or something like that, and you saw a violent crime unfold right before your eyes, that is a stressful, post-traumatic stress kind of possible scenario there. And it would be one that you'll likely remember, almost certain to remember that for the remainder of your life. And so there's plenty of these scenarios that can play out with ultra-violence that people witness firsthand in reality that create these real strong mental pictures and ideas that persist for a very long time throughout one's life. Other forms of this that are done by proxy don't have nearly the potency that they have, but they still have some effect. Okay? So like, I'm still disturbed when Ned Stark got beheaded in like episode 3, season 1, of Game of Thrones. That still bothers me. And it's total fantasy, and I know it's total fantasy. The mind works by association, and so when we constantly have even fantasy exposures to violence, it creates additional points that we can then associate with our overall mentality in our brain. So there's low level violence, of course. There's fantasy violence, of course, and violence becomes a derivative of entertainment in that fantasy world, right? So like how many action films, they're called action films, what that just means is violence films, right? And so it becomes a consumer product that's entertainment based, that, how many people globally have gone to see the Avengers, and the whole thing is filled with fantasy.
Driving your car real crazy is also an action. You don't have to kill anybody.
I don't recommend that.
Well, in a movie.
Right, please.
So, about like people not like maybe taking out their anger or rage on video games. There are so many other ways that people let out that rage or their anger or frustration. Like today, one of my friends was really angry at soccer practice. She was aggressive and she played really well for the most part, but she was physically like very aggressive, like shoving the other girls. And you're supposed to be aggressive in soccer, but it was kind of like more than she normally was. And so I also have, like, sometimes if I'm angry, I just want to, like, break something or whatever. But I don't really go to video games to relieve my anger. I usually take out my anger, and then I'm told by other people that, like, don't worry, it's okay, you know, it's gonna be fine. It doesn't matter that it's like that. So, I didn't mean to get, like, on a personal thing to it, but all I'm trying to say is, like, I think video games and stuff it's not just video games, but like the movies, the media and everything also plays a part into why some people are angry and why they need to take out their rage on, or goes one of these rooms that Ben was talking about. And
Rage
stuff
room.
Like that. Rage room. Stuff like that.
Sure. So, I don't know. Good. We'll do Bill, then Carla, then Michael, is that okay?
I'd like to call our attention to the fact that we're beginning to talk about the real problem, where violence is just the extreme of that, and that is anger. And the prevalence and destructiveness of anger and the behavior that anger motivates. And so it's kind of a matter of definition as to where along a continuum you're going to say, well, this is violent and this is not. Is cyberbullying violence or not? Poking a person real hard as opposed to pointing your finger at them, and so on. But the problem that we're having as a species, all of us, is dealing with the amount of chronic anger that we have that comes out all the time. And there's an enormous amount of relationship breakdown due to the buildup of anger in relationships. People will form relationships and then the anger builds up and it drives them apart. Sometimes it produces violence in the relationship, but very often it produces some other outcome, like they just can't stand each other and so on. But so the problem, I think, is the anger, and violence is just one way that problem is manifesting itself.
So let's say, Carl and then Michael and then Ben, let's say for argument's sake that our only window into the world was our media, was like we didn't have much social interaction. Let's say that our only window into the world, our only one, was just media. Newspaper comes to the door, you read it, you watch television, get online, the internet, all this kind of stuff. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that was your window into the world. Would that window be skewed into a much more violent one than exists in reality?
Yes.
I think the answer to that question is yes.
Over tenfold.
Yeah, and so what that window into the world does, even if there's a large component of it that's fantasy, is it creates a recurring, consistent pressure of stress and anxiety into our lives, which then manifests into things like what Bill was discussing, the anger, right? So there's many people that social isolation in the United States is at an all-time high right now, than it's ever been in all of our history, social isolation.
Did you say that the anger is being caused by the media? It sounded like that's what you said.
No, it's a dynamic. I'm saying it's a dynamic to it, not the cause of it. It's a vector. Okay. So like if your point of view is that the world is going to hell in a handbasket, right? Through this window of which you see the world, it's going to have a major influence on your overall psychological demeanor, right? One of which is going to be mostly negative. You're going to get a skewed idea about human reality. You're going to begin to think that everyone's a thief, everyone's a criminal, everyone's out to get me. It's a scary world. You know, I'm only safe behind these four walls. And so what people end up doing is they imprison themselves because the world is such a scary place outside the reality that we have in our experiences. That's to me is the core underlying this whole thing. Let me hear from Carl and then I'm down the line.
I've done just that a number of times, withdrawn from the world around me for a while. I go through these spells. I just don't want to be around people, don't want to interact. And then before I know it, I do find myself a little isolated. and overwhelmed if I do go on the internet or watch it, the news, and it's negative. It feeds into my negativity. So one of the ways I get around that, rather than just I go out and walk on the greenway and meet people as I'm walking. But another way is I turn to the internet through that, and I watch the cat videos. I watch the little kids interacting with animals. I watch animals interacting with animals. And it brings me such joy that I just burst into tears with the joy of the moment of watching that. Go from tears of being overwhelmed to tears of being overwhelmed, one extreme to the other. So the internet can help that way. But getting out in meetings like this, getting out and socializing, being with family members, I have been reading the same thing, that we're so isolated. That's causing a lot of depression.
But I think but we can also isolate ourselves exactly that way though, even through the internet, through our phone. I watch people in bubbles. I mean, they just walk around. They don't even know that they're about to bump into me because they're so enthralled. And to me, that also is a form of isolation.
Absolutely.
Even though you might be communicating with somebody through that device or on the internet, to me it's still...
Usually your friend on the end of the sofa.
Right.
It's being out, you're actually out and about,
exactly.
but you're still in your own world. That's like the ultimate
Exactly.
isolation. you
Yep.
know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Virtual prison.
Yeah.
Virtual.
Michael.
I think I look at this discussion of the video games, the movies, the media are what make us imagine and pretend to violence when we were kids. And I think back to my childhood, and in 1957 we got our first television. We were the first people on our block to have a television. And I watched television an hour, maybe 2 in a week. The games I played the most with my friends was to get guns, toy guns, and play war with each other. And we did it to the point where if we could get like 6 guys, we'd have 2 different groups. One would run away and the others would hunt them down and try to kill them.
Right.
Or like, I mean, that was our play. I had never seen a game that did that. I had never seen it on movies. No, that wasn't.
No, but it was in the mind and the psychology of every single adult around you in our culture.
But that comes also from instinct. I mean,
You've heard of it.
you're
No,
hunters
I'm
and
saying
gatherers.
that-
Part of it is instinct.
I'm saying that I don't think the media is the cause of anything. I think it's a reflection of something.
Yeah.
And I don't think that when I didn't have, the books I read weren't about war.
Let's
The
stop.
books I
Let's
read
stop
were-
and talk about that real quick because I think that's a hugely important, a very big important point here. Is that if that were true, Michael, then we could analyze this from the monetary perspective. Like so, the news station is obliged to make the news that people are going to watch, right? And so, the news station that shows the house fire, okay, it's going to get a lot more attention than the news station that shows the cat being taken out of the tree, right? Fire department, news or whatever it's called.
I don't know, the cat could be.
Yeah, so I mean, I would like to watch the cat run on the tree, but if I have 2 screens playing, and one's playing the cat being brought down to the tree, and the other one's playing the fire, I'm going to be watching the house on fire and the people escaping the house, right?
Or a cat on fire, that'd be both of them.
So the idea here is that the monetary incentive to show us is not necessarily a reflection of who we are, it's a reflection of what's going to draw our attention, what draws human attention.
That
Well,
is who we are.
Yeah.
No.
But
I think this is being misconstrued. Because the thing that's going to grab naturally our attention, okay, is the thing that's the most outrageous, the thing that's the most asymmetrical to the norm, to our normal experiences. Okay, so if there's a bunch of people walking down the street and Megan comes by with her purple hair, who's going to catch her eye? Megan, because most humans don't have purple hair, and so it's a unique, it's a novelty.
I was going to say, there's a lot of different hair colors out there.
Yeah,
Okay, not the best example, but the point
I haven't
remains.
seen purple hair all either. That's the first one I've seen.
Well,
I was in New York and a lady was in Grand Central, Times Square, when we were there last, and there was 2 ladies and a man walking down the street completely topless. Yes, the women were fully out, right? And absolutely 100%, not that I'm a perv, that caught my attention. That was something I don't see every day.
That's a better example.
Okay, thanks. And so, like I said, the two TV screens, and that's not a reflection of
How did they not get
my
arrested?
What color was the hair?
blonde. They're both blondes, but the point is that
Wait, so they didn't have any tops on at all, or were
Correct.
they like just flashing?
correct. It was they were doing like a show there, and it's very liberal, and it's okay there. The point is that when something occurs that's so different from our norm that we see, regardless of what it is, we're going to have a greater affinity to observe that, to have our attention migrate to that thing. It's the thing that represents the biggest unknown. It's the most unusual thing, which then naturally represents the largest threat, which then grabs our natural attention. And so the news, of course, is going to put the most sensational thing. They're competing for who has the most sensational thing, which then grabs the most viewers, which then grabs the most royalty for ads. It's literally that simple. To then say that's a reflection of human nature is, I think, a reversal.
That's why, in other words, the news media are responding to who we are.
What interests us?
I'm sorry?
What interests us?
Yes, and little kids, toddlers, they automatically, they will frequently fight. They have to be stopped from fighting. And as adults, we love fighting in all of its different ways. We love to go see people beat each other up in the ring.
Do you?
Do
Do you love that, Bill? Do you love that? Do you love watching that?
I have in the past enjoyed watching wrestling and so forth and skillful hostile behavior. I don't have that.
So why did you say that we
I'll
have?
wrestle you right
And
now.
so-
Hold on, why would you say we have that and you don't have that?
What
Anybody here, I'll take.
see, shaming as a way of stopping the expression of a viewpoint, I don't think is optimal.
I'm not
Now,
trying to shame you. I'm
well,
trying to
saying-
call it the reality. You just said that we all love to watch fights, and you don't love to
probably-
watch fights. I don't love to watch
I-
fights. So
I-
who in this room loves to watch fights?
See, I can't
There'll be some, sure.
complete what I'm saying. I think that we, in our personal lives, we are frequently confronting anger in ourselves toward people. We use pejorative labels for people, calling them awful names and so forth. We shout each other down.
So that's
Wait,
saying
let me-
calling us a
and let-
species
let me-
and saying we love to fight, is that a pejorative towards human beings?
Can I, like, for
Are you
instance,
just including what you say into your own language?
let's also consider sitcoms where the display of hostile behavior is admired and so on. We respond to anger with excitement. A Trump rally, get him out of there, drop him up, I'll pay the bill, and so forth. And,
Have you been
all
to a
of
Trump
this-
rally?
I have.
I've seen the stuff. Yeah, we do it.
So is it possible that you saw a clip from one piece of one Trump rally and that you're making assumptions about?
We love to see anger. We hold our fists and guns high. We gather together in mobs to attack.
Who is the we you're speaking of? I don't hold my gun and fist high. Who are you referring to?
Humans.
No, but
No, but some of us here at this table are human and don't like that.
exactly.
You're saying that I'm not human because I find pro wrestling and gun movies, I find it all kind of boring.
Of course.
Actually, I find it ridiculously boring and
course.
predictable.
Of course.
So, does that mean I'm not human?
Of course there is variability.
Well, then, no, I'm saying, am I less human?
When
Am I less human because I feel that way?
see the anger?
Of course I'm telling you, I'm angry. But I'm not angry about that. I'm angry being told I'm not a human.
Well, people get angry when they get accused of things.
I've been accused of being subhuman. I don't like that.
Yeah,
I find it insulting.
But that's not what I'm saying. You're taking it that way so you can be angry.
You said us human.
All right, so let's follow the
Yes,
So
hand.
not only am I not human, I'm not one of your kind of human.
Michael, let's get this back on track. Let's get Ben had his hand up.
I'd
so
like
Ben-
to answer the question. See, he's
I
not letting
I
me
had my
answer.
hand up like 10 minutes ago, and then
I just want to point out that, of course, given any particular thing that we're talking about that humans do. Some people do it a lot, some people do it not at all. There's a significant inhibition among some people and significant elaboration among others. So what I'm talking about is not an individual. I'm not saying that Michael is a human or non-human or anything like that. I'm talking about us as a species.
You are not willing to call Michael a human.
So, Bill, the kind of naturally apparent contradiction here is that, like, for example, to cherry pick an outlier like we do with religion, we're going to have that conversation when you say, oh, well, there's churches that don't, some Christian churches that don't even believe in God, right? You use that as a point in that case, and now in this case, you're using a generalized statement about human beings in general when there's many outliers to the contrary. So, are you going to point out the average bell curve of normalized behavior amongst all groups consistently, or are you going to cherry pick the outliers in some cases and not the others? That's the problem.
I'm talking about our species all over this planet, what they do, and the extreme of violence and killing and so forth is just on a continuum that goes all the way from very mild put-downs, mild arching of the eyebrow and so forth, mild ways of being hostile, all the way to the other extreme. And the relationship breakdown is enormous. Half of marriages ending in divorce, and if you take a look at most of those, it's the buildup of anger.
So is it true or false if you say, if you look at the window of the world through the television lens, through the media lens, you would definitely believe that human beings, our species, as you like to put it, are violent. And this world is, like I said, going to hell in a handbasket. But if you go to the street, if you go to this meetup, if you go to all of your common everyday experiences, you get the opposite viewpoint. You get the opposite data set.
We're not just violent, we're also loving.
Majoritively we're loving, correct?
That may be, time-wise and everything, that may be the predominant thing. But that doesn't mean that we're not faced with some pretty bad stuff that is related to the anger that we tend to experience.
Fair enough. Ben was up first, so Ben and then Matt.
Yeah, so Bill a while back said that nobody should ever get angry. Should slaves get angry? I mean, a long time ago, there was a bunch of slaves. Do they have a reason to be angry or a reason to be violent against their masters and have a revolution? And are there any problems today that might be deserving of anger or violence? I mean, sometimes there's no peaceful solution, so you got to solve it a different way.
That's a great question. We should definitely address that tonight. Is there a time for violence? Is there a book on that?
There's a time for anger. I'm sorry.
So that's kind of what I was going to say. We were talking a lot about offensive violence, but there's also violence. So if someone runs into a school and is planning a mass shooting, and someone shoots, like a security guard or police officer shoots that teen, like that's violent behavior from a police officer or a security guard in a defense. It's like defensive violence, and I don't think I think it's easy to talk about violence from an offensive thing, and then also. I think Bill, I think I understand what you're saying. I think if I wasn't exposed to media and just lived in the world, then yeah, like I would say people are manifesting this very loving, non-violent way of living. But I think I do think that it's in us. Maybe it just doesn't manifest. Maybe it doesn't manifest as much. Because it is fascinating that most of the movies that people are drawn to that make the most money are violent ones. Just like Michael, when I was growing up, like I played war with my friends. Like there was something in me that was like, it was fun to kill my cousins when we were growing up and stuff. So I think I agree with you. I just don't think it manifests as much as positive characteristics.
Well, yeah, I agree that I agree with Chris about the predominance of positive behavior, especially in Well, I don't know. I was going to say, especially in non-intimate relationships. In other words, the more the people are somewhat distant and can behave according to etiquette and ritualistic behavior and talking about things, playing Eric Burns games people play, rituals and pastimes and stuff like that, golf and stuff like that. As long as that's going on, we are maintaining truths. But it's when relationship becomes more intense, then people begin to have expectations of each other that the other does not live up to, and that produces anger and then hostile behavior. And then you have episode after episode after episode of struggles for dominance and anger-containing memories. And yes, we do wonderful things. We also do terrible things, and all in between. And so it doesn't mean that we don't do wonderful things, but the fact that we do terrible things, the fact that we have to have passwords and keys, and locks on our doors and so forth, the fact that we have to stay out of certain neighborhoods and so on, that is still a problem. And we can belittle it. We can say, oh, well, that's just outlier and so forth. We're really wonderful people. Let's not pay attention. I think, of course, we need to pay attention to the things that mess up our lives. And if your close family member is killed by somebody, it may be an outlier, but that's a tragedy for you. It's a tragedy that it happened. And so I think it is important for us it's important for us to try to understand why is it happening and what can we do about it.
One thing I think first step we can do about it is stop allowing our brains to be programmed by such exposure to such massive amounts of violence from so many different sources. And I want to definitely get to that part of the discussion.
Well, I was going to make a couple of points. I know you've been using the example of, an alien or somebody coming and looking at TV and seeing, wow, this is a violent place. And it does reflect maybe some extreme examples of violence in our culture. But I think we all know, and I just want to make this comment because I think there's lots of crimes that are not reported. There's lots of crimes that happen behind a home that we drive by every day. There's crimes that are not even deemed prosecutable, so they're not going to be prosecuted. So even when we look at statistics, I'm just saying there is the potential that the TV is perhaps portraying extreme examples of violence. They're going to spend, a week on the mass shooting. They're going to spend a week on the, 5 bodies found buried in somebody's farm. I understand all that, but true violence, I think is actually underrepresented, and because a lot of it's not reported, a lot of it's hidden, and a lot of it's not even prosecuted. Second point I was going to make. Those statistics.
50% of all statistics are wrong.
Is that a contradiction of what you just said? Is that statement self-contradictory? You said there's no statistics, there's statistics and no statistics.
No, I didn't mean to say no statistics. I misspoke then. No, I didn't say no statistics.
For one instance to what you're saying, rape kits are not being processed because
just on the news, right?
Because it costs $1,500 and there's 30,000 in any one county. It's backlogged, and we don't allot in our judicial system monies to have rape kits processed.
And that's factual. I mean, what you're talking about, that's factual.
That's out
that
there.
crimes are underrepresented, I think.
Because of the Me Too movement.
Well, the other point I wanted to make, though, is speaking to what Matt said, we recognize in the law, in our culture, which comes from based on common law England, we recognize the right to defend yourself and to defend somebody close to you. If one of you gets up and tries to attack my daughter, I'm going to come between you and my daughter, and I have the right under the law to do that. If I end up,
and so do I.
And if I end up doing something to you as a result,
everybody in the room besides the attacker in this group would likely be on defending her as well.
Yeah. So no, I'm just saying though that and the law even extends and recognizes legal violence to the extent that in many jurisdictions you can protect your property with violence.
Law, right?
You come into my house, I'm gonna shoot you dead. So the law even recognizes that not only do we have legal violence against another person, but we're even allowing that for the possession of property. I can't take my house with me, but you come in my house and, you know, of course you've got to meet thresholds in terms of reasonableness, and yes, I thought she was coming in to cause harm, and I had every right to, you know, shoot in self-defense.
It's always your words against a dead person, though. So who's gonna win in that case, right?
If you had an alternative, like, so if someone was entering the house and they seemed menacing and you felt cornered or whatever, and you happen to have a loaded firearm and, you know, the statistical, everything was perfect, which never really happens, but let's say it did. And there you are in the corner with that gun and you got a beeline on this dude, menacing dude coming in your house, and boom, you cap him. First of all, you'd be like a hero, you know, it would be, all the gun rights people would be ticker rating you.
Not necessarily with the left, because they will skew it to be that person acted. They didn't. The light wasn't on. They couldn't really see who that person was. And if that person ends up being of a different race, then you have the whole ethnic thing. So granted, in a perfect world, but that's not where we live in.
Right. So let's say that we have this spur of the moment, like, event happening. All these things happen in real life, and when they do happen, they happen with initiative. They happen in real time, and they're chaotic. They never come out as like movie like people would plan. They always usually, you know, the number one way that someone can increase the chances of them getting shot is by getting a gun, right? So the number one thing you can do to dramatically increase your chance of being shot is to go buy a gun. That's statistically 100% locked, ironclad. That's true. Most
statistically?
Yeah, absolutely. Ironclad.
Okay.
Ironclad. The highest chance that you have of increasing your risk of being shot by a gun is to go buy one. But anyway,
but how do you interpret that? I mean, just as an example, it may be that people go and buy a gun because they realize that they are under an unusual risk of being shot.
So just to finish my thought here on this, to kind of get where I'm going, I'll be brief. Is that initiative in these heat of the moment type situations? Initiative is almost 100% everything. Right? This is true in military. This is true in civilian home invasion. All things. Okay, so let's say you're in the corner. You got the gun loaded. You got a beat on this guy, and he comes in. Boom. If you had enough time to really rationalize the whole thing out, and you had the means, let's just for fantasy here. If you had a button that you could press instead, when you press that button, all it did was 100% peacefully subdue that person, like Spider-Man's web, right? Webs them to the floor. Oh, hold on, hear me out. You had a button that you could press. You had a choice. You had your gun, okay? And the person's coming through, and you had a button. It's just a fantasy. And you press that button, and from the ceiling shoots Spider-Man's web and sticks this person to the floor, completely incapacitated and now rendered harmless. And you had time to really think about it, what would you do? I would reckon you'd probably press the button.
I don't have a gun, so I would hope that I would have a button to push.
Right.
But here's the other thing, is that the button you really need to push is the button that's your adrenaline. Because that's, when you keep talking about initiative, that's what we're operating under. When I hear a noise in the middle of the night, I'm going to assume the worst thing, because A, that's human nature, because that's our survival instinct. That's our survival instinct, right? If you were sitting next to me and you made a fast, violent gesture towards me, I'm going to naturally assume that you mean you're going to harm me. So granted, I think the real button you have to push is partly our human nature, the adrenaline that we operate under, because if I'm in my house and I hear that noise and I hear someone coming up the steps and I know my husband's next to me and I know my daughter's not home yet, I'm going to assume that is somebody I don't know. That's an intruder. The adrenaline kicks in. I don't have a gun, but I have a baseball bat, so I'm going to use something. Granted, I'm not a violent person. That would be great if we had a button that we could push, but we don't, and really that button is ourselves.
Yeah, so the point in the button analog is that, with the school shooter example, if most people had, if the person subduing the shooter had a stun gun, had the chance to deploy the stun gun adequately to end the shooting, most people would prefer that methodology. Even though the kid is in the school shooting, people would rather see the kid subdued, not killed, if possible.
But why?
If possible.
But ask why.
Why is that underlying the reality here is that we're all not nearly as violent as we think we are.
But the why there is that they want that child, that killer, to be prosecuted, to find out what went wrong. How do we stop this from happening? If you kill the child killer, the intruder, I'm sorry, I'm still giving my example. if you kill that individual, there's no recourse, right?
And they won't come back and kill again.
It's not just all the time that, oh, we want to be less violent. No, sometimes, and you hear people that have violent crimes in their family. They want that person prosecuted. They don't even want the person to get the death penalty sometimes because they want that person to live
and suffer.
Well, for what they did.
I think the button example is kind of hard because it almost makes it such a fantasy world that it's like, well, everyone would of course prefer a perfect world.
No, there are
like
non-violent weapons.
Even people in the service, if you said, hey, if you had the chance to go to war or push a button and have a peaceful resolution, like, I mean, you would have to be psychotic to say I would still rather go to war. So I don't know if that's like a great. I guess it's definitely just a fantasy scenario. I think the reality is violence. I would argue that violence is necessary.
And the law recognizes that.
Violence is necessary. We'll save that. Michael and
I have a gun. It's just this one. It's older than I am. You brought it in? And, I got it because my grandfather left it to me. And I learned to shoot it because I don't have any competence. And I have 100 rounds of ammunition for it. And it sits locked in a case in my closet above where any child could get to it. There aren't any children in my closet, so I have to be very careful about that. But it's locked up. I've taken it out twice in the last 3 years. Both times for the exact same reason. Somebody's walking around my neighborhood in the middle of the night shooting a gun. And I'm like, well, that really sucks. So I called the police. And the lady at the thing says, well, did you want the policeman to come to the door? I said, no, to come in my door is probably not a real good idea right now. I've got a gun. And they said, okay, well, thank you, sir. I'm not going to go out and hunt the guy down. But somebody's walking around my neighborhood shooting a gun. No, I don't want spider webs. I don't know how to use that. I don't, if I had a magic wand and I could do stupefy, then I'd much rather stupefy and kill. But what I got is a gun.
Well, how about a glue gun?
I don't have one.
Well, you can probably buy one.
No.
Corey?
Well, I'm just going to say, like, I'm surprised that there's only one objector to the button there, because I know a lot of people would say, well, geez, if I press the button, he's just going to come back the next day and he's going to know where the spider web is, and he's just going to go run it. So I'm just going to kill him now, and I don't have to worry about him anymore. I can probably think of several people who would have that reaction.
That's not what I think. There's a guy in my neighborhood walking around outdoors shooting a gun. I know the demographics of my neighborhood. I don't know what kind of gun he's got, but if you draw a circle, the radius of a handgun strike in any place near my home, there's no place you can aim it that's not potentially aiming it at somebody else's house. We live in a crowded environment. Fairfax County passed a law finally saying that no, there's no safe place other than a licensed range in Fairfax County that's safe to fire a gun. So discharging a firearm for any reason is a misdemeanor. Doesn't matter why you did it. Yeah, you were protecting your family from harm, but you discharged the gun. That's a misdemeanor.
What about into the ground?
But back to your example, back to the perfect
You
world
can't
though
say
is that
shoot somebody in the foot
you
safe.
push the button and you catch the intruder, he gets prosecuted and goes to jail, so he's not
I
going to
don't
come back.
believe that.
What if he
but I
hires a
believe
fancy
it's
lawyer and gets out on like
No, perfect world, he gets poor defense and he's in jail
public
for 20
defender,
years.
right? Yeah.
So let's move to the rejection concept. Is the I think very fascinating piece of this whole thing. So what I'm starting to personally realize is that like I can reject these violence. I can reject the violence that's being perpetrated on me, even if it's done by proxy. For example, if somebody is telling me a story about a news story that they heard, okay, like Kavanaugh, this rapist Kavanaugh, and deep details of what he did, and he forced this lady down and put his hands over her mouth, I can say to somebody that's telling me that, I can say, hold up, I do not want to hear about these kind of things. Because when I hear about these kind of things, they get into my imagination and they stress me out. And I don't want to be stressed out by visualizing, because when someone tells me a story, I have a mind's eye, I think about it, I see it in my mind, right? And what that literally did is it put violence in my mind. I can say, wait a minute, it's not healthy for me to watch Game of Thrones. It's entertaining, but it's ridiculously over-the-top violent. And it's a really good example because it shows you how much violence is now permissible to our general population. This show is adored by the American public at large. And so what I can say is someone says, hey, come on over and watch Game of Thrones, I can say, nah, the show's kind of cool, I wrote some cool reviews about it, it's great cinematography and all that kind of stuff, but it's just not good. It's not, I'm rejecting it, it's not healthy. And it's not something I agree with. So I'll have to miss out on that entertainment. I'll have to find another form of entertainment. I'll have to watch a cat that makes me want to cry for joy, not because I don't need my stress levels up, I don't need my anxiety, my adrenaline, and I don't, most of all, need that visual of extreme violence in my mind. It's not healthy for me to have lots and lots of these images. I believe it's not healthy for me to have lots and lots and overwhelming large number of these images in my mind. Would you
So
all
are
agree
you
with
questioning,
me?
oh, I'm sorry, that's your question, whether
Yeah,
we
that's my
agree
question.
with rejecting violence?
Is this a legitimate orientation that we should advocate for? Or should we just say, violence is just part of the nature, and so roll with it?
I like that, what you just said. I think, yeah, that's good, just rejecting the artificial violence in society. Yeah, I think that's great.
I think violence is being normalized by our political system, more so than movies and games these days, because both sides are being violent against each other.
Not my side.
Telling
Not going to say
lies,
which one.
telling lies. That's why when I heard Ben Sass, saw several videos of him, I was so thrilled that there is a voice out there of reason. The senator from Nebraska has a voice of reason, and he has a way of presenting it that is non-offensive to most people, I believe. Like I said to you, he made points to the Senate as to what their job was constitutionally, and brought them back to stop delegating your job to either the president or to the judicial branch. When you are elected, come into the Congress, the House of Representatives or the Senate, and represent your people back home. Do what you were elected to do, and then go back to your home state. He wants to put forth several issues. For one, the president has to release his tax returns. Presidential candidates need to release their tax returns. Another thing is the lobbyists. Don't come into the House or the Senate as a potential lobbyist for when you leave. You should not be allowed to lobby afterwards. Stay on for big businesses, big pharma, Monsanto, and all these corporations who are going to get you on their paycheck while you're still representing the people of your state.
So the violence component to this is that you're talking about politicians using violence to promote
That's all
their
our
ideology?
political system is these days. For the last 2 years, we've been consumed with the violence from both sides. Each side yelling at each other, calling each other liars. Mostly the Republicans.
Whoa,
Whoa, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Let's not
do that.
be political.
Yeah, we're not going to be political, but
Well,
where are the
president-
videotapes coming from?
okay.
Maxine Waters, I mean, the
Our
videos are out
president
there.
is what I'm referring to more than anybody else on that side.
Also, the violence idea in politics is that obviously it would be obviously a potent, if you could integrate something or a threat of violence into your political, if you can marry your political ideology with a threat of violence, that would be an extraordinarily effective tactic. There's no doubt about
I
it.
mean, like a baseball hour will put you in a cage.
No, like
It's what's
like
happened.
like
It's
if
been
like
married.
if we don't do this, which is my political agenda, X. If we don't do X, we then face the possibility of Y happening to us.
Well,
Wait,
I mean,
now,
I guess
now
I'll
my,
be-
my
we don't-
history is not good, but Chicago, decades ago, there was a Democratic mayor, I don't remember, in Chicago, who went about bribing and threatening. So yes, I don't know what that gets people in the end, marrying the threat of violence with your political agenda, but it,
So what it does is it bolsters it. So something that standalone on its own would be pretty weak politically. If you marry it with threat of violence, it can now become a very strong point politically, is the idea. And I'm not pointing at any candidate, I'm just saying that this is definitely a long-standing in politics tactic that's been used all throughout
yeah, it's
history.
not just the last few years, it's
No,
been
this is
used throughout.
very long-standing.
Yeah.
You know, and like
And not just our history, but I mean worldwide. It's
Well, let's
Sure.
not
not a-
forget, there are a bunch of nukes pointed at this very room this moment.
Right, so there's an example right there, is that, you know, we have this, we have to do X because of the threat of Y, right?
Why don't we do
Everybody
it?
knows that there's a potential, outstanding potential of full-scale nuclear war around the whole world. So that threat of violence is omnipresent in our lives. Does that cause some degree of stress for probably everybody? Yeah. What's that?
It's also the President of the United States who's made the most amount of effort to deter the biggest threat of nuclear power to the Western world.
Oh, you're talking about Trump?
No, Rocket Man.
So
Okay.
why does he feel a need to slam people to the floor and get them out of here, punch them in the face, and
Trump's done that? He's
It's
physically
upon-
slammed somebody to the floor.
No,
and
he's
punched people?
talking about, oh, he slammed them to the floor, that's my guy.
People don't like Trump because he's
Get him,
apolitical.
let me talk, you had your say, okay? He's telling people, get him out of here, punch him in the face, and that's exactly what happened to the man who was pulled out of one of his rallies. The man was punched in the face, and as he's getting punched, this is on video, look it up. Trump is telling him, punch him again and
look
I'll
at the
pay for.
history.
Wait, let me get through with the sentence before you
You
attack
have
me.
the platform, he's raised his hand, she has something to say, and I have something to say.
Then I will shut up since that's what you just said.
I did not
See
say
how
that, I'm just saying you have
anger
the
arises?
platform.
Well, so-
Anger is not wrong.
First of all, is it
We never
right
said-
for people, for me,
it's
if I'm a
normal.
politician and I'm out to have dinner, and somebody who disagrees with my political view gets to invade the restaurant, scream and yell at me, that's a form of violence. They
It
may
sure
not
is.
physically
I don't
punch me.
disagree.
That's a
I
form
don't
of violence.
agree that that's right either. But you
Well,
cannot
it's
say that
harassment.
it's
It's
right
not
for the
violence.
president to do this.
So let me interject something here. So this, in the rejection of violence kind of ideology, right? I've seen many, many examples of many different politicians. Full spectrum. I don't care about political party affiliation or anything, race, creed, I don't care. Gender, I don't care. I've seen used over and over and over, but for political gain, people using fear, people using violence, and threats of violence married with political agendas. And so what I do to reject the violence kind of idea, to reject violence, is I fully tune out to political theater. And I believe that's very healthy for my brain, to tune out of political theater. I don't have a dog in this fight at all. I don't even know what Carla's talking about, and frankly, I don't care. No, not to what, I care what you have to say. I don't care about these instances because I realized a long time ago that for politics, I'm always evaluating information 2 or 3 proxies away from the reality of whatever it was happening. I wasn't there, I didn't see it. It's going to be spun by 50 different spin doctors in 50 different directions. And if I tapped into all of them, I'd have no clue to what really happened.
So you think they're faking the videos, you didn't see it?
No, what I'm
You're just
saying,
gonna kill this subject?
Are we back to rejecting violence though?
Yeah.
well, so I'm showing why, exactly why I personally have tuned out of political theater, because it just creates anger, like more or less to what Bill's point, is that, and let's be honest about politics, we're judging information. I've said this a million times, like, I think it's a voice of reason, it might not be. But like, let's say that I'm trying to judge the president's decision on something. I don't care who the president, President X, right? I'm trying as a civilian to judge that thing. First of all, I'm probably not a subject matter expert on whatever it is. You know, I might know some things, but I guarantee I'm not a subject matter expert. Second of all, I know that there's a CIA, FBI, there's a tremendous layer of Homeland Security, there's a tremendous layer of information coming from private, secret sources that I don't have privilege to.
Which they should be telling all of us, so that we can tell them what to do.
But see, that's another point. But the facts of the matter is the way it is right now is I don't have sufficient information to judge whether or not that's a good decision.
Because they keep their information to themselves so that they can hold power over us unfairly.
You have access to videos. We've seen it. You've seen what Trump says. I've seen what the left has promulgated by attacking people.
Right.
I'm saying whatever, that's fine.
I'm agreeing with you.
So all I'm saying though is that you do have something that you can point to. There are videos. The president signs an executive order. That's public information. You can look up everything that your codes, your United States code, everything is at the punch of a button on the internet.
The less important things are.
It's there. So you may not know that the layers that everything goes through, but you get the end result. So, and usually they support that end result by showing how they got to this executive order or how they got to this code or whatever. So don't reject that you can be informed.
Well, so I see our government has deteriorated to a kleptocracy, literally, to a government that's run predominantly by wealthy and connected people. And I think that's very, I think there's a very large amount of evidence to support that. Lobbying, the lobbyist system is definitely, it doesn't matter if it's Democrat, Republican, Independent, doesn't matter who's in office. There's the whole White House and the Congress is crawling with lobbyists that represent very powerful, rich interests. Every candidate that's been up for president in my lifetime has been a wealthy, connected individual. I've never had the opportunity to vote for a common person, someone that I think would represent the vast majority of Americans.
Well, Trump was a common person who happens to be wealthy.
He is wealthy.
He's a common person, though.
Oh, I don't know anything about that. That's what I'm saying. So, like, I reserve that judgment. I don't know.
Well, at least he runs his mouth.
I don't understand what you mean by a common person.
He's not a political figure. He never has been.
He'll say what's on his mind, at least.
Everyone else that has run for candidacy, Barack Obama, whatever. Yes, thank you. Was a senator. Clinton. What was his background? They were all political figures for the decades that. I don't know, because I'm not good with history. That's what I'm getting to. If you're equating common, he's common in the sense that he's apolitical. He's not a politician. And that is partly why he was voted into office, is because people are tired with politics.
Exactly.
They're tired with both sides, the middle, everything. I can't even, so keep that in mind. I know probably everyone in this room hates him, but keep it in mind that there was a reason that this, brass,
So I just argue that
bad
people in this
hair
room
guy
are
made it.
offended by his overt racism and by the things he has said about women. I would grab him in the pussy. I like to do that. That's
I've heard it all.
the statement.
Yep. I'm aware of all the crass things he
We are
has
not
said.
used, actually, most of us who are old enough to have a gray hair, are not used to have people boasting of their rape. Of women running for office in this country.
If there's no penetration, it's not rape.
That is a new experience.
Is that Kavanaugh?
But I don't have anger toward Trump. I feel sorry for him. But I think that he is dangerous. I think his past life and everything created who he is, and we as a species tend to admire people who beat their chest and so forth, the alpha individuals, and so, especially if they're male. And so he is a victim just like we are. Mm-hmm. But that doesn't mean that just because I feel sorry for him and see him as a victim, doesn't mean that I think he should be there. Sure. I think he should be removed. We need to have somebody there that, is competent. And like you were pointing out, somebody who has experience and knows what they're dealing with. Not somebody who just says whatever comes to his mind and is sabotaging, bringing down alliances between nations that will help us not go to war. Instead, he's saying, no, I'm going to start revving up nuclear arms, and so forth, and pulling out of pulling out of international agreements, going in the opposite direction from what we should be doing. But he doesn't know better. That's who he is. And I think I worry about him maybe committing suicide when he becomes one of the most detested people on the planet. That's going to be very hard for, given his strong need to be looked up to and so forth. But something, I think, must be done. But that doesn't mean that the answer is to be angry at him. One can still feel sorry for him.
So let's get some of the hands, but the core point here was that I raised was that the idea of taking any kind of political agenda and coupling that with a threat of violence. In other words, saying if we don't adopt this policy, then this violent thing might happen. The idea here was that is a form of psychological violence that we could, if we wanted to, reject wholesale.
You mean if it's true or if you're making it up?
No, regardless, like it's something that we can refuse. We can say no to that.
Well, why should we ignore that if it's true?
This is the ultimate test about rejecting violence, because I do agree that one side more than the other, if I can say that. But I do not agree with using fear in any way to get people to behave in a political manner or vote a certain way. I don't believe in fear or using violence for that from any side, whether you're green, right, left, middle of the road. No, that's not appropriate. But, I mean, I want to stop talking about Trump, because we're here to talk about rejecting violence, and you queued it up with, using violence or fear and aligning it with political agenda. So what I want to say, though, is going back to rejecting violence, this is the ultimate test in our country right now, November 6th. This is the ultimate, and leading up to that point, the midterms are so volatile. It's going to be our society rejecting violence, because, I mean, look what's happening. The words, the vitriol, these exploding pipe bombs, and I think the left's behind it. But anyways, all I'm saying is this is the ultimate test about your rejecting violence, because we have to choose to reject it. Every day we hear the news, what you choose to hear or believe or not believe. And this is the ultimate test from a societal perspective of our United States, is how much violence are we going to reject up to November 6th? Because I think with less than 2 weeks to go and seeing what's happening now, there's the potential for things to escalate. We've had senators shot, a senator on the right shot. I mean, we have had, violence and the threat of it. And I am fearful that, I don't care who it is, it's a human being, but I am fearful that up until the minute, someone's going to make a statement, and someone's going to get hurt.
So I'll even that, and then we'll go down to Tim.
I think your comment was marrying violence with a political agenda.
Correct.
There's definitely a wing within liberal America that is rooted in gender identity politics and is promoting a violent expression of gender identity politics. And if you look at other nations who've gone through a similar process in the past, it's wound up very not ideal for anyone regardless. So I just wanted to
please give me more details what you're talking about so I can understand. I'm not quite following.
You mean like Antifa?
Yeah.
Well, Antifa, but when you look at, so when you study Hitler, it was based out of ethnicity and, hatred against a certain race. Okay. And that, came out as expression through laws, but then the laws came out as expression through violence, then isolation, then imprisonment and death and, all these terrible things.
And how does gender identity tie into what you're saying?
Well, a lot of the roots to what segued into that expression culturally and societally on a political level began rooted in the idea of gender identity politics.
So if you give women equal rights, you're basically Hitler. So be careful. If you give women equal rights, you're basically Hitler. I think that's where we've ended up. And I think the reason we get there is largely because of religion. If you look at religions in this country, they're very clear about what they want to achieve in their end goal. If you look at Christianity, read Revelations in the Bible, there's a ton of violence. It's all destroy this, fire, brimstone, kill everybody. It's the goal of religious right in this country is basically to get to the point where everybody is dead except for just a few people who are left and get all the gold.
You can have people
That's
who
the
write their
model.
religious.
Gender
Now
identity
liberals,
politics.
by and large, the liberal left, they want to see this sort of kumbaya, this kind of unrealistic thing where everybody puts down their arms, takes off their clothes, and dance naked under the moon. That's their sort of.
That's the far left.
That's their like. But that's like the narrative they have, right? It's like put down your silly ass guns, put a rose in your AK-47. You know, take off your clothes, dance around.
Let's compromise. Shoot each other naked.
Smoke some funny money or for some funny.
All leftists are not like
All right,
that.
let's let
Come
Matt
on.
speak.
Of course, I'm putting them in a box, but you have very different views. You have a religious view, a biblical view, a Christian, because Jews don't have this anyway. It's very much about wipe everybody off the planet except for a few people who believe the right things. Liberals, as far as I can tell, and I'm not a liberal, but liberals seem to want everybody to put down their guns and stop fighting. So saying that one group wants violence and one group doesn't want violence, they both want violence in the same amount, I think is being unaware of really like the tracks on which they are driving. Because the religious right has tracks. And if you follow it to the end, it goes to this place called the Revelation, where there's tons of violence. That's what they want. And they want to buy lots of guns, and they want to have lots of grenades, and all be prepared for the day when all this violence will break out. And they're like always fantasizing about this very violent endgame that's required by the Bible.
So they don't want it, they just believe it's going to happen and they can't stop it.
There's some
So outside of generalizing, that's such an extreme.
there's some that will tell you that.
Matt was going to say
example,
something.
creating Jerusalem out of nothing was a requirement in order to get to the part where we get all the violence. Part of the biggest emphasis of creating Jerusalem was by Christians, not Jews.
Wasn't there already a place called that?
No.
Hey, guys, you want to say something?
Yeah, he's been talking all night. You and I just got into work.
He has not been talking all night. Please.
So this exists. This is the goal, is to create the Jerusalem because that is a requirement. You can't get to the end game until you first create Jerusalem. So you got a lot to overcome if you want to argue that people quote on the other side are equally violent, because the biblical fantasy is violence. If it's on a Christian level, on a Jewish level, it's slightly different.
I wasn't going to respond to that at all. I think I was wanting to respond to what you were saying. There's been a lot since then, so I'll kind of just make
You'll
it
catch
a
me
general.
up. I'll catch up with you in a second.
So I think one thing that I think hopefully we can all agree on is that the person who is violent is responsible for their actions, and something that I think we are normalizing as a culture, which is kind of scary to me, is we're making it too easy to point a finger and not be responsible for our own actions. And the example that I think about is a few years ago when the Senators were shot at the baseball game. If you guys remember, there was some stuff with Bernie Sanders, and a lot of people wanted to blame Bernie for saying something that made this guy go out and do that. But the right actually went on Fox, on plenty of different publications, went on and on how Bernie Sanders is not to blame. This guy is responsible for his actions. Like, even though Bernie made some very clear, like, it's good to be uncivil, and it's good to be aggressive. I don't remember that well.
I'll take your word.
Yeah. So now you see, just in the last few days, these pipe bombs, and you have the other side, the left, pointing at someone and saying it's this leader's fault. So although I do think there's been
You have
violence.
the right also pointing at the left at the same time, like I just did.
Right, so-
The right is pointing at the
So,
left.
so,
and
so all
thinking it's
the
down.
right has said, or that I've seen, is that the media creates this, which is what we've also been saying here.
Mhm.
So we've also been saying the exact same thing the right's been saying, and just to be very clear, I know what you and Bill mentioned about Trump saying at the rally. He did say that. The guy, he was being escorted out. One of the Trump supporters punched him as he walked by. We don't know what happened before that in the video, and then Trump did make this comment. That did happen a few years ago during the campaign.
So Trump told him to keep hitting the guy?
No, he said like get
He
him
said
out of
he would
here.
pay for his lawyer if he,
Yeah.
yeah.
He
So
didn't
what
make
did
points.
this guy
So-
do?
So, but
Start.
just to be very clear, like I've heard two people mention
Spoke
that
words.
that happened 2 years ago, and I
It's ongoing.
Right.
All you have to do is go look it up yourself tonight when you get home, the most recent Trump
Okay, and that's
violence,
fine.
outrageous, and they're there.
I let you speak. Remember, I just raised my hand and you interrupted.
No,
me.
I
Like,
did,
just
just like I was interrupted before by the three of you.
I'm responsible for my actions. You're responsible for your actions. So now you have Hillary Clinton saying we should be uncivil. You have the attorney,
Don't agree with that.
past attorney general, saying when they go low, talking about the right, when they go low, we kick them. And
Don't
then
agree with that.
then you also have Maxine Waters saying run them out of restaurants, run their doors down. Like so what's just interesting to me, is that I think it's hard to talk about violence when we're talking about it from a very skewed bias, because the examples here are only against Trump. It's like, if we're going to talk about violence, let's just be honest. I'll sit here and admit that Trump said that, but is anyone in here going to say anything that just happened a week ago? That just happened a
Well,
week
the
ago?
body slam this past week. He's pointing out that somebody else body slammed a reporter, and Trump is saying that's my guy.
You had a sitting vice president while Trump was running, a sitting vice president saying, I wish I could take him out back and beat him up. A sitting vice president.
And nobody questions that.
And no one has even
Oh, no,
mentioned
we're-
that.
There's nothing wrong with wanting to do it as long as you don't.
On
No, but
both
you-
sides.
All I'm saying is, you can say you're questioning it, but the examples here tonight used by Bill, I forget his name, no. Michael, used by you, are all against, which is fine. I'm just saying, I think it's hard to have a healthy discussion when it's such one-sided. Like I'm 100% for you, but saying it after the fact that, oh, I think there's a wrong too. It's like, well, let's use, if we use one Trump example, let's use the Hillary example that just happened last week, that says people should be uncivil.
I don't agree with either side.
And what I'm saying
May
is,
I have a rebuttal?
all I'm saying is, let's use that as an example at the start, because I think it would help push this conversation forward instead of having it after.
Sorry, no. Go ahead.
Oh, there's only been one voice of reason the last 2 years on either side. I don't condone violence on either side. I am not for that. That is not what I'm about. Anger, we can get angry here, but we're not going to be violent against each other because we respect each other. Anger is a good thing, I think, if you feel strongly about something. You felt strongly about your religion, for one thing. Look up Ben Sass, Republican conservative from Nebraska. He has been the junior senator in Nebraska, and he is the only voice of reason that I have seen, and for a good long time I haven't watched any of the media because I was doing what Chris said.
McCain's played that role.
Has he? But Sass has been the only one that I've seen, and I've just really started watching his. Pick up a couple of his videos when he addressed for the Brett Kavanaugh hearing. He addressed the Senate before they were to vote, and he's got 12 or 20 minutes where he's telling the Senate what their duties are, going back to the Constitution and telling them this is what you need to do and what you need to concentrate on, and don't worry about this because this body the whole Congress, the Senate, and the House of Representatives is the judicial, is the legislative body. We're going to make the rules here. Don't worry about what's going to be sent to the Supreme Court later on, because this is what we're about.
But if you
And he spoke after Kavanaugh was nominated and got elected.
Confirmed.
Thank you. Confirmed.
that's
He
the
spoke
Senate's job.
But they haven't been
No,
doing
no, the
that.
Senate's job is Kavanaugh would have to be before the Senate to be.
Well,
the
he was
Senate's the only
confirmed, yeah,
one. No,
yeah.
no, before, but even to convict him of anything, he would have to be in front of the Senate.
That's
The
not what I was
the
talking
House of
about. He was,
Representatives-
that's not what I was saying, I'm trying to say. I said it poorly. He was saying, don't worry about what Kavanaugh's job is afterwards. Some people are worried that he's going to try to reverse laws and things like that.
Oh, right.
Because we, as the Congress, are going to handle the laws here. Now, after that speech, he made another one about the Me Too movement. It'll blow you away if you watch both of
I'll watch
those.
it. What's his name again?
Ben
Sass.
Sass, S-A-S-S-E.
I'll watch it. Trey Gowdy's a good one. And Jim
Nebraska.
Jordan.
What is it?
So,
Trey Gowdy.
How do you spell that?
G-O-U-D-Y.
Tim, go ahead, you got the floor, brother.
G-O-W.
W-D-Y.
Tim?
Well, I was just going to say, it's like bipartisan politics as we've known it. And just like a lot of religions as we've known it. You got good and bad, right and left, God or Satan. You know what I mean? You got these choices and you don't want to pick the wrong one. And everybody knows what the right one is, right? It's like part of the Hegelian dialect to
Everybody.
create an artificial problem and provide the solutions. And let the people think they have a role to play. They don't give a shit how you vote. In however many years, it's going to be another liar up there. And chances are he's going to be from the Democrat or Republican Party. They don't give a shit about whether you vote or not. The vote is not for the officials. The voting process is for the controllers. I mean, the controllers, not the controllers. It's so the control can think that there's a chance they can influence it one way or another. The system is completely rigged. It's all theater. I mean, look at the theater that you've heard, the scandal in the White House the last time we had a white Democrat president, right? And now we got a pussy grabber up there. What's the big difference? Oh, but one was good and one was bad. They're both bad, they're both good. I mean, that's what they're feeding you, man. People think if you see it on TV or you hear about it on the radio or the internet or if you read it in the newspaper, well then you got it. Just like religion, you got to get in the fight and you're going to be on the right side, period. When it's all set up, you don't have any control over any of it.
But there's other ways to change the world by voting, like through the internet or something.
Well, I mean, voting gets you what we got.
But what if you just stopped voting and you did something else to change the world instead?
Well, things would change the electoral process.
Well, what if you just didn't care about the electoral process?
All right,
So
let's
what-
bring it back. Let's bring it back. Bill's up next.
Bill, let's go.
Of course, I always have an unpopular viewpoint, and here it is, that number one, we're talking about the terrible things that we do. If we're going to stop doing them, we have to understand them as deeply as possible. And we have to understand what we humans are like. And much of what we have been talking about is our tribalistic nature. We divide up into groups and attack other groups. In here, there's the anti-religious group that is attacking religion and so on. We need to find out, we need to work on suppressing our tribalistic tendencies and suppressing our anger, not saying, oh, anger is a good thing and it makes us really achieve good things. No, our ethics does. The anger is something we have to deal with and control, and in some way minimize as much as possible in order to do the right thing, not the angry thing, not the thing that is hostile, because that ultimately just makes things worse. When we do it, the other does it. When the other does it, we do it. We have all of these escalations. We see it even wherever we go, even in this room. We see struggles for dominance occur. That's built into us. And so what is needed is for us to work on our ethics, work on what we should do instead of these things that are built into us that are not good. We have wonderful things built into us, the ability to love, to nurture, and so forth, connectedness and everything. We have
reason.
But
The reason, don't
yeah,
forget.
but we, yes, that's right. And the reasoning ability, except reasoning is a tool, and we can use reasoning to do wonderful things and terrible things. We can make nuclear bombs, and we can make nuclear power plants, and so forth. And what we have to do is to use our understanding of ourselves that we're capable of doing because of our language and our technology and so forth. But we have to recognize that it's not them, it's us. That's why I use the word we. I'm talking about our species. That doesn't mean everybody is the same. No, there's the whole range of stuff. But the idea, I think that it is fine for a person to just look the other way and say, well, I don't want to contaminate my mind with that sort of thing. But some of us have to be concerned about what's happening to these poor people. Us, we being relatively protected perhaps, but there's tragedy going on all around us because of what we do. And we have to understand why we do that.
So Bill, I heard you saying that we are in fact responsible for each other's violence. And we heard earlier tonight that only we ourselves are to blame for, say, using a gun. And you're saying that we actually are, you say the tragedy is going on all around us because of the things that we do. I think what I'm hearing you say is that we actually have an investment and a responsibility for each other, and that our actions are not so simplistic as simply belonging to the agent, but that there's an interplay between different people that creates escalation and pushing and shoving, and that we actually inspire each other to acts of greatness or acts of violence, and that there is a multiple dependency. I tend to agree with that model a little bit more, especially when you realize that a lot of gun violence, for example, can be boiled down to a 4-year-old playing with a gun in the backseat of a car that shoots his grandma. It's hard to blame a 4-year-old for that and say, well, you know, guns don't kill people, people kill people. It's just too much of this sort of random examples of violence. Well, I think grandmother, who is dead, would disagree. She felt that
it's not violence.
She felt it very violent.
It's not violence, it's a mistake on the part of the kid. The kid's motivation is not to kill grandma.
But every murderer will tell you that it was a mistake.
And that's why we have the law that recognizes, and that's what I wanted to get to, is what you said, Matt, initially, and we've probably said this all along, is that you had said that, you know, the person that did the violent act is responsible, right? So now you bring up the 40-year-old. Well, the law recognizes that minors can't contract. The law also recognizes that if you're under a certain age, you can't be tried like an adult. Goes back to whether or not you can create the mens rea, or whether you have the capacity mentally to have that motivation to, you know, do the violent act that you did. So to me, that's I'm just curious to see. We've heard some of the perspective in the room, but is that correct? Should the law make that exception for violence because of capacity. We do it if you are under duress. That's another category. So if you point a gun at my head and say, I'm going to kill you if you don't shoot the person across from you, I'm under duress. I may shoot you, but that's because I fear for my own life. So the law makes all these exceptions, saying that yes, we allow violence in these circumstances. And we see, again, going back to what makes the media news, is you hear about the 10-year-old that took the little 4-year-old in the woods and killed the 4-year-old. You know, where did that come from? Is there just something wrong with that 10-year-old? You know, is it society? Is it all these many different things? But I mean, that's why the law comes around and makes these distinctions, exceptions, and we've made it, I mean, you're the, I'm sorry, psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, you know, so I mean, you know, going back to when you can, you know, have the capacity to, you know, to kill somebody, whatever. The other thing I wanted to mention was about reject, you know, going to what you were saying. We can definitely personally reject all the crap that's out there, all the violence. I can choose to, I'm not going to play that game, I'm not going to go see that movie, I'm not going to talk to you about what was on the news last night, but it doesn't take away from the fact that it's out there, it's happening, which I think is kind of what you were talking about in terms of we taking responsibility,
Yeah.
you know.
So there's a notion of like turning a blind eye, and like, it's hard to defend, right? So you say, well, we can pretend this stuff doesn't exist and tune it out or whatever. But there's something else happening. There's a bandwidth, right, issue. There's so many lanes on the highway by which cars can go down. Human capacity is, there's a rate by which we can process information. There's a volume issue. We can only process so much data. And so if I then allow a majority of my lanes on my highway to be filled with tragedy and violence and horror ideas and, you know, just these, like I said, looking through the window of media in that kind of world. What I'm then doing is I'm crowding out, right, other things that are really beneficial and useful to me that could improve my state of mind, improve my mood. And I would just argue that we should do it in proportional to reality. And a reality, in my opinion, is one of which a majority of our time is spent in peace, dealing with people graciously in a loving manner. And so that should be the predominant ideology and ideas that go into our brain, that which fits our reality the best, so we can act the best in that reality ourselves. And then by diminishing those negative things, we don't then plant into our own brains these horror ideas. And these horror ideas, like, let me just give one personal example. I'm not to call her out. I hope she's not listening to the live stream, but Megan's mom all the time talks to her about, go ahead, you explain. You explain. Like the whole pedophile thing.
Oh my.
Just do it really briefly so everyone gets an idea what I'm talking about. Just quick, because
It's
people are trying to
basically
talk.
like every day I'm in the car, she's like always talking about like the apps or something that I might have on my phone. She's like, delete that. There's people on there that can know your IP location. They can track you down. Pedophiles, all day, every day.
But the danger of that is that is going to desensitize, I don't want to use that word necessarily, but you're going to end up probably, I mean, if somebody told me over and over again, be scared of Bigfoot, and I don't think Bigfoot exists, at some point, it's that fear is no longer there, right? You may or may not engage in behavior as a result that would have been different if you had not heard every single day, pedophiles, I mean.
So I have a question. Does she tell you to stay away from Catholic churches?
I thought they just interested.
No, she doesn't.
Apparently not.
She doesn't.
This is not balanced. This is.
But the point is,
Just curious.
hold on,
Because I heard there was a pedophile or two, or 254.
the whole reason I raised the
So
concept is that the
it's-
conditioning of the mind, the point I'm raising here is the conditioning of the mind is that middle-aged or men represent pedophiles. And that's extremely incorrect, and it's also an ideology that I don't want my kid to have. And I want my kid to think that every adult male over the age of 40 is a psychopathic pedophile. And so then I try to, and I'm not trying to ever say that that these people don't exist.
But if they have a white hat.
What I'm trying to say is there's a range, and the overwhelming majority of the people that are in this country and world are pedophiles. They do exist. So let's say they do exist, and you should be mindful and cautious in everything that you do, right? But you should not have the ideology that
And in fairness, they spend all their time on apps looking for kids on the
Right,
internet.
of course
They're
not.
busy.
Sure, so let's
They're not
go,
hanging out here
let's
at
go
school.
Carla, and then Megan, and then Tim, and close it out together.
I wanted to respond to your anger, that it's not necessarily good. If you think back to the 60s, which we can easily, you and I, there was a great deal of anger behind the civil rights movement. But that anger, to your point, had to be tempered in order for good to come of the anger. They could not get out there and walk with anger because there would have been more killings, more annihilation. We never would have had the same thing happen 50 years later. Have the ability to have what's happening now. I'm going off on a tangent because we're back to the 60s again, I think, with our race issues. But that is what spurred the anger behind the unfairness in treating people. Women's issues, women's ability to have jobs came about in the same era as the civil rights era. And soon thereafter, gay issues, lesbian and gay issues. So the anger was good to spur it on, but to tamper that anger and channel it into ways such as sit-ins and marches that were non-violent is what got us to go ahead and move forward and start giving rights to people who had them before, well, since Abraham Lincoln until Jim Crow came in the South right afterwards.
You should mention that when Hillary says we will be civil, she is talking about all of those things. About marching across bridges, about sitting, about all of these things. She is not talking about violence.
Is that what she said when she talks to you?
I didn't hear it, but I know what Hillary Clinton means when she talks
So let's go around.
I know what Trump means.
This kind of action. She is interested in non-violent demonstrations. The left has no interest.
What is when they're low, we kick on me?
So let's just go around and get everybody like real quick for the few remaining
I would
minutes
say
we
that's
have.
inappropriate.
We don't have that much time.
Corey,
Yeah, no, we don't.
The actual quote is when they go low, we go high. It's from Michelle Obama.
We don't know.
So, Jerry, was there anything that you wanted to contribute to this evening? Something that struck you as
No, I'm completely one time. This business about watching too much TV and watching violence on TV. I think that parents, well, older people generally know, are smart enough to know you don't go to bed after watching something like that unless you want to not have a good night's sleep.
Sure,
Because
right.
your brain's going to be working on this stuff.
Right.
So,
what you're kind of saying there is that does get into your mind.
absolutely.
Right.
But I would think that part of parenting, I would think, would be with kids occasionally, especially at nighttime before they go to bed. Some people do this, some mothers do this. Right after the kids are in bed, they talk to them and calm them down and so forth. And give them time to clear their mind and think about other things during the day, what other things happen besides this movie that I've just watched the past 90 minutes or whatever. It just, the business of anger and the responses to anger, I can't imagine a person with any education thinking that he has to respond violently to whatever's happening. It would seem to me that he could be able to reflect this momentarily, that tomorrow I won't be able to remember what it was that we were fussing about, all this.
So I better do it before I forget.
And I'm just lost.
Yeah, very good. Steve, do you have any tidbit you want to throw out? Oh, I was just going down the line.
It's unfortunate our society is so polarized, conservative and liberal. It's difficult to have a peaceful conversation to discuss the issues of life. And I quit watching TV about 3.5 years ago, and I feel a lot better now.
Do you feel like it's reduced your thoughts towards violence?
Yeah, I was preoccupied with TV. My day consisted of watching TV, and I watched it until I went to bed. It was a non-productive life, and I passed it.
Yeah, so people all often tell me, you got to watch the news. It's really important to know what's going on. But I don't watch much of the news, and I don't seem to suffer any bad effects from it. I mean, it has no effect on me whether I watch more or less news, except knowing the news. It's an entertainment product. It has nothing to do with the world around me. I mean, people don't, there's not more or less violence around me because I watch violence on the news. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, you hear about there's a predator loose. I've never seen the guy, not once.
So we're about to go to Megan, but just before we do, I want to mention that there is a phenomenon happening amongst our children. Social isolation metrics are coming up into the category of all-time high, if not all-time high right now in the United States of America. Also, depression and psychological, negative psychological ramifications for children are also spiking right now in the United States of America. And one of the biggest indicators that's the most serious to my mind is self-harm. Our children are hurting themselves at an all-time high right now for some reason. And I think it ties
like
into
with a
this,
knife or what?
Just in general, self-harm, body disfigurement, cutting, all these type of things. So Megan, do you have anything to say closing about the topic of rejection of violence?
She rejected.
She rejects rejecting violence.
She's playing violent video games. She can't be bothered.
Tim?
What is it, Pokemon?
Better watch out.
Angry Birds.
Tim.
Angry Birds, that's right.
You play Smash Brothers?
Hold on, Tim has the floor. Oh, I'm sorry, Flavia, my bad. Holy cow, how did I skip? I'm so sorry.
Someone mentioned talking about how much video game and fees and all this stuff affect for children. I think that reality is just like the news itself. Watching TV, when our kids my son watches TV. He's like police officers assaulting civilians, and what he talks about is like thinking how he's going to act that ever happens to him. So it's sad to think that my son's 18 years old is worried about what if that happens to me. So that's something that he didn't pick up on movies or video games. That's something that he watched in the news.
Gotcha.
So I think that's more correct than movies and video games.
So of all the different dynamics we talked about tonight, you would say like the news is probably a very large vector in this whole discussion.
Yeah, just like your daughter, she's always worried about what you say. She's always talking about, pedophile. But I mean, she's a young lady, and she probably, look older. So yeah, she's gonna be thinking about it. I thought about it at her age. Yeah, I got these boobs and I have a nice body, so I'm gonna watch myself. I'm gonna be thinking about pedophiles and people stalking me. Yes.
Gotcha.
So I don't think she's right. She's wrong. It's just the way the world is to this now.
Gotcha. Tim?
Yeah, I may be repeating myself here, but I don't want to, I hate to do that. I don't want to
Go
be.
ahead, you're taking a stand, I'm proud of you.
I don't want to be guilty, I don't want to be guilty of committing any struggle for dominance type of thing. That's why I like to raise my hand, I don't interrupt, I don't string together meaningless prepositions in attempts to stall time or hog the floor while I'm figuring out what point I want to repeat next. But again, look up the Hegelian dialectic. It's all, yeah, here I go repeating myself. For the first time.
No, it's all good.
Mental prepositions thinking. It's about keeping you confused, making you think that you have a choice when you don't is a great way to do it. I haven't watched television, I haven't had a functioning television in my house for 12 years. Do not miss it. I spend many times, I mean, I can remember the last time I wasn't on the internet, the last time I was not on the internet 24 hours. I can't think when the power was out or something.
Right.
But you think I'm looking at whatever I can get through the television? Why? I could just sit there and have a television and get it drip fed. There's good information on the internet, valuable, useful information that's not the easiest thing to find. People are not really paying big money for it. In fact, not a lot of people want it. But again, it's the Hegelian dialectic. Play your fears, your selfish wants. Who wants to be told by some lying predator of either party what is right or wrong, who you can marry or who you can't marry, who you can and can't have sex with, what you can and can't drink or smoke or eat, or when you can do it or where you can do it. Getting married, they tell you when a child has a minor has they have the ultimate authority of when a child becomes an adult, when they gain the majority status. And we're squibbling about which son of a bitch has a right to appoint some brain dead, washed up law clerk to the fucking Supreme Court to make decisions about this. That's really what is it? Thanks for all your trouble. You know what I mean? And the hell of it is, I don't really get shamed that much for not having a television or watching television. I get shamed a little bit for sometimes not knowing anything about sports. But I get shamed for not voting. I'll tell you right now, it doesn't matter. I don't have to know enough to think I don't need to think that I know enough to feel like I have a right to vote. I know I don't. I don't think, what would give me that right if I thought I did? How could I be sure? It's all theater. That's why it works. That's why nothing changes except the figures at the top. So why would I want to participate or encourage someone to do that myself? I don't. If anything, I would try to ask them questions as to why they would shame me or others because I see it as I see it, and I do not participate in it as a direct result. I think voting is violence. Is there any beatniks or hippies in here that's ever heard that?
Now you're shaming those of us who vote.
Huh?
Be careful, you're shaming those of us who vote. You don't want to be shamed for not. What I'm saying is, the tar spreads both ways. I'm out. I've got no dog in the fight. None. I'm not saying anybody vote for anybody. I'm saying, why are you voting? What are you voting for? And do you not have anything better to vote again than vote for than simply voting against those other lying pieces of shit, which they are, whichever ones they are. They all are. It's all theater. It's the Hegelian dialectic. I'm repeating myself. This is not a struggle for dominance.
So the only other person that got a chance to speak, Andy. Not to spotlight you, but
that's okay. I struggle with. I want to say that I reject violence completely, but I do struggle with that idea and being honest with it because, what is a society supposed to do when peaceful marches don't work? When a government just plows people down. I mean, so what are people supposed to do in that situation? Or, even
someone's raping a woman. Is she not supposed to be violent about it?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Or harming my child. I would seriously kill someone. I think. I would honestly. I would think I would have the envy to kill someone if they were harming my child or somebody completely innocent. But I want to think that, yes, I would reject violence, and I think that is really the right path. But are humans really capable of it? Deep down, at this point in our evolution, or even into the foreseeable future, maybe 5,000 years from now, maybe we'll be at this point where we're capable of rejecting violence completely, but at the
and then the aliens come.
I'm not sure how it is, and I totally agree with civil disobedience too. honestly. That's the way things get changed. You sit around voting only, like, nothing is going to change. I'm all for voting, but like, you can't expect that to actually, you know, change society into like the direction that I guess the masses desire, which isn't always a good thing, honestly, but.
So share your sake.
So I
have
still,
more in the car if you want.
I still am going to let us go down the side, but we're over our time, so you know, by all means, don't feel like ashamed or embarrassed if anyone leaves. But so we'll just continue to go down the
I'm
line
just
here.
continue to be astounded, but I do think that the country is splitting. I don't see it so much as liberal and conservative, to be honest. That's not really where I see the split. The split I see, to be honest, is between people who, for whom the word fact actually means something, and the word people for whom facts have been lost. They've been kneeling at the altar of fiction for so long that they can no longer even identify a fact if it were hit them in the face. I mean, we can't just continue to imagine that the parade of lies that the religions offer us on a daily basis is going to prepare our mind to be able to separate what is really happening in the world from the sort of the flights of fantasy that go off in our mind where we can imagine anything we want. We're just about getting ready to celebrate the descent of an imaginary being who commits an act of horrendous pedophilia against a virgin girl who is as underage as she is, unconsenting, who then becomes the conduit for an entirely male fantasy. And this is like everybody in the planet is just getting ready to open up all of the stores and sell merchandise, all on the basis of this sort of oddly disturbing, if you look at it too closely, act.
There's some women on board with it too.
So Ben, are you kind of tying that to the violence concept here? Are you saying that like since our culture is predominantly derived from this type of ideology?
The problem is that the predominant religion in this country is a religion of violence. It calls itself Prince of Peace largely because it isn't. This is a serial act. Its foundation is genocide. Serial genocides throughout the New Testament, the Old Testament. And it's followed up by this sort of human sacrifice that leads into an age of fire, brimstone, and once again a future genocides. We happen to be living in the middle with just a few less genocides in the New Testament, the early part of the New Testament, where we have a couple of more gentle ideas like women be servant to your husbands and slaves obey your masters, and a couple nicer words sort of in this middle part, but then we're getting ready to go into the apocalypse and the end times and the chaos. And I think that to the extent to which people have really committed to these fantasies and these fictions, it makes a population that can be, as he says, completely guided around by the nose because they have no ability left at whatever age they are to separate what's real from what's completely made up. I see that as a growing problem for the country. And I know we struggle with it.
Steve, why are you taking a picture of us?
Why not?
You just took a picture of us. Yeah, that's kind of odd.
You know what?
The brain's memory is not all that reliable. He will often take pictures.
I think that's really odd.
Well, if he doesn't want any pictures of
I prefer to delete it, yeah.
From a right and left perspective, if the right took a picture of anyone on the left, we would be deemed pedophiles.
I don't even care about the right or the left. It's my personal privacy and safety. I don't want a picture taken of me sitting in this room.
Yeah, especially when people are talking about pedophilia and things like that. Like, it's really odd.
Well, there is when I do live stream, there's just audio. There's no video.
No, but he just zoomed in and took a picture of us.
Well, if you ask you not to have the picture, I'm sure I'd be happy to delete it.
No, but why would you take it?
I frequently do that.
Of people in the group? This will be my last time here.
No,
people are randomly taking
bizarre,
pictures.
dude.
Yeah, that's weird.
What? I don't think my group's bizarre, but
Of people taking secretive pictures?
This just happened. I have no idea.
I mean, I think it's pretty common in events to take pictures.
I think it's common
Well, no,
if
but
he was
not
like,
in this-
hey,
come
everybody,
on,
let's
man.
get
If
a
I
group
took a
picture,
picture
but
of-
he just took a picture of 3 people.
If I was just sitting here and I zoomed in on you, like, wouldn't that be kind of odd? Like we're in a relationship. You're married, right? If I'm a guy sitting here taking pictures of a married woman, like, is that not kind of odd? No one finds that odd in here.
I could see if I were doing it, it would be to help me to remember the people in that
The
scene,
3 Christians in the
especially
room?
since I have memory difficulties. So.
Maybe he wanted a picture
But
of
I was
3 Christians.
wondering, I was going to be next.
Yeah, you're next by all means, please.
And I'll be brief. I
Well,
want
I
to.
want to know why we're taking pictures. Could you just
Why do
answer
people normally
why?
take pictures?
I mean, just, I'm not part of it.
If I was taking a picture of Megan, you would have an issue?
I guess as the moderator, I'd say, I know that from all the groups that Steve Crystal's in, he takes pictures of, like, the group. I mean, I've seen many of them.
It's
Yeah,
a
but we
common
have
thing
but
to take pictures.
We don't do
But we're not in a
Skype.
public event. It's quasi-private. We still have some
Well,
expectation
okay,
of privacy.
you've checked
But it is
I
open to
deleted
the
it.
public.
So it's
I know,
gone,
but
okay?
there's a consensus with this group that you don't record video because everyone doesn't agree on their photos being taken.
I've never heard of that.
No, I never.
No,
Yeah, that's
I
why he
never
doesn't.
heard anything.
That's why he
I agree
doesn't.
with you. It's
That's
That's why he
because,
doesn't live stream.
that's because he's live streaming the audio. He's not doing the video because he thinks that maybe somebody might be concerned about it being out in the world.
Right.
But I think we humans are always taking videos of where we are.
If I was
I'm
taking a
sorry,
picture
I'm
of
done.
anyone in here,
I'm
there would be an
done.
issue
I
with
don't- I don't
it. If I was taking a
condone
picture
that
of
behavior. I
Megan
won't
zooming in
condone
down here,
the
you would
defense
have an
of it.
issue with it.
I would,
If Mandy, if I was taking a picture of you, you wouldn't have an issue with it. Like I'm just like,
If
oh,
you're taking a
I
picture of
agree.
me, I wouldn't have an issue, or you're taking a picture of Megan, I would. But that would
Right,
be true
it's-
with anybody for any reason, taking a picture of Megan.
Would you have an issue?
I
if
just
taking
came from
pictures of
another
Megan?
meeting
So
and
I
I
took
took
pictures.
pictures.
Yeah, exactly
I'm
why.
I
backing
won't
up
get a
what you're
chance to
saying. I'm
respond,
finding
I
it a
guess.
little weird
But
that
in
he's
a
not
public
taking everybody's
event,
picture
Right,
and
it's
asking.
not like
She has no
taking a
expectation of
photo
privacy.
together, let's get a
And
group
ask
photo.
him.
Yeah,
Everybody wants
So
to
I
take a
think-
picture of
I
me,
think
I don't
you
care.
have
This would
every
be a
right
great
to say
topic.
that.
Raise this topic.
What,
About-
expectation? Yeah, it'd be a great topic
Yeah,
because,
Well, I get a chance to respond.
Of course, yeah, photo and surveillance and imagery and picture taking.
yeah.
I'm actually going to do a topic on that.
Well, I'll just make one comment in leaving.
Interesting.
I'm sorry, Bill, you go and then I just make a comment after you.
Okay, I'll be brief. I wanted to respond to Carla a little bit, like you said. Now, in the first place, you have the viewpoint that the vast majority of people have about anger. That anger is a good thing, it motivates you to do good things.
It can be.
Can be,
Can
yes, I understand, it can be. And all that I'm saying is that anger motivates behavior that generally is not good. And it is not the only motivational state that
Right.
it's not the only motivational state we have. We can have great concern about something that is going on and figure out ways to do it because we have a concern that we do not have to have the anger. Having the anger is relatively normal. It's one has to train oneself not to develop anger, I think. But like what example, Trump, I don't have anger toward him. I feel sorry for him because he's a victim as much as we are. That doesn't mean that I'm not motivated if there's something I can do to help, make a difference. And
I
so
was taught early on, Bill, and you're all about teaching from the get-go, right? Taught early on not to express anger, and I'm part of that Me Too movement, partially because I was taught to be quiet, don't tell on people, don't make waves. So I'm part of the Me Too movement for keeping quiet and not showing anger as a child.
those are two different things.
No,
I'm
no,
not
no,
saying
no, no, no,
be
I'm
quiet.
saying I had anger with me, but no outlet for it when I was a child.
No, that's the hydraulic concept that
So-
it builds up and you gotta let it out. That's not necessarily a correct paradigm there. But at any rate,
It actually makes
I've
it worse.
expressed,
When you express it, it makes it worse.
very often, it often escalates the situation and it's not good for your cardiovascular system.
Nor is it good to
System.
hold it in with no outlet.
So there's an alternative.
Right, there is, and I wasn't given that.
Right. No, I
So we have to
understand.
learn how to have these outlets, but just for a parent to tell their child, you're not allowed to show anger.
I'm not
And
advocating.
Tim, you may have experienced some of
I'm not
this too.
advocating.
I've had the shit beat out of me
I'm
for
not
existing, for being in the way.
I'm not advocating that.
So anger can be good.
My position is very atypical, and it's kind of complicated. It's not just, oh, you should never be angry. No, that's not.
No, I didn't hear that. I didn't hear you say that.
I think we probably all agree in a general sense, mostly like what Mandy said, is that there's this, for the most part, we're going to wholesale reject violence, right? But then there's very extreme situations that might arise that comes up that we would be violent because it would be like our only way to stop something from happening that we otherwise, couldn't.
So there's a difference
There's-
between imagining that there's a case when you would want to the conservative right-wing gun-toting fantasy, which is arm yourself to the teeth and then walk around with the hope that you will accidentally run into somebody doing something that you could probably escalate to the point where you might be able to convince somebody you were defending yourself. Like, it's a premeditation of rolling towards wanting that violence and then putting all the pieces in place to create the situation.
There are some segments of
Where
society.
this goes, you arm yourself to the teeth and you find somebody who is parked in a handicapped parking spot, and then you go and you're like,
So basically, he's joined the police.
So there's this quote, like,
they've all done that.
in the airborne, right? There's this quote up in the hangar, this huge quote, and it reads, I'll paraphrase it, it reads the extent of like, men and women of the United States of America, sleep warm in their beds at night because there's good men willing to do violence on their behalf, right? And that's paraphrased. That's not exactly how it was worded, but there it was in big letters. And the idea behind that is like, the American way of life is predicated on dominance and violence that is of the most extreme that you could ever imagine. So we have everything from colonialism to like these, wars in the Middle East and all this stuff. It's all a continuation of our extreme abundance that we have here in the United States. It's done because we have this fist that will pound anybody into oblivion that dare goes against us. When Saddam Hussein was our pal, he was doing what we told him to do. We were fist bumping him and everything was good. But the second he stopped doing what we said for him to do, and he decided to try to run a pipeline up through the Caspian Sea and get outside of OPEC and all this nonsense, we said, no, you're not doing that. Next thing you know, he's a terrorist, he's got weapons of mass destruction, and we smash him into oblivion, and we have a mock trial and we hang him. Right? We are the power of the world. And we come from a history of extreme violence, us being white Caucasian people from Europe.
And we don't have control over that. Why are you including us?
Well, because you do, actually. We all do, actually.
I can't stop them from attacking somebody.
Well, okay, but we can, right? And so this idea of this wholesale rejection of violence is part of that. We're saying, no, we will abandon this way of life. We will abandon this whole entire history and finally have this evolutionary change in our ideology and our thinking collectively by wholesale rejecting the violence. We're going to reject it. We're going to reject it in everywhere it manifests in our society, every time it comes up, because the underlying facet of that is totalitarianism. It really is. If we go into the Middle East and we stomp some country, like there was no weapons of mass destruction. There was no, that you all know the history, right? In Vietnam, we got rid of all that surplus equipment from World War II, et cetera, and so forth. I mean, it's just the money game, and the idea is that the trickle down does work. We are the richest nation in the world, and we enjoy the lifestyle we do because of the wickedness that's been done before us on our behalf. We got to stop pretending that's not reality. Our children walk around hyper-saturated in violence, and it's getting them to a stress point to where they don't know how to blow off the steam appropriately. This is the great experiment for our children with this, always on internet, pornography, and everything else. They're so damn confused and so frustrated that they're cutting themselves at an all-time high.
So I was born at a time and a place without internet. We didn't have running water, much less or television.
Mm-hmm.
And we ran around, Indians and cowboys, cops and robbers. I mean, there wasn't a stick in the yard that we didn't point at each other and shoot. So I just get this feeling that kids have been saturating themselves in violence, and it'd surprise me if they didn't go back 70,000 years. Like, I'm not sure monkeys don't fall out of trees and start pretending to be violent with each other.
Right, so-
We've raised dogs.
Yeah.
And they're two puppies, and they're, biting each other's necks right out of the gate.
Right, so I'm speaking to a life rhythm. The beat of a drum from cradle to grave here in the United States is hyper-violence. It's hyper-violence beyond all recognition. And so you'll see this in the Western world. You'll see this in the history, and you'll see this in the white Caucasian European history, is this saturation of hyper-violence. It's necessary. It's a necessary predication for colonialism. Think about it. The only way that you're going to kill off a bunch of
there's a culture that has a little bit less than that. And the Native Americans were running around and scalping each other, putting each other on pyres until shrinking heads, and there was a fair amount of violence.
Where are they now?
Well, they didn't develop.
They've been eradicated.
They didn't develop immunities to smallpox. It wasn't really their fault, but it happened. It happened. But I don't know that Europe is less violent in their fantasies. And I'm pretty sure that even Asia, they bury people up to their neck and then chop them off with a big axe. They're very violent, and the violence is very public. It's an irony, but while our TV, our public media is very violent in some ways, certain ways very violent, we actually go incredibly out of our ways to remove violence from our society. And I think, to your point, that the West has actually done a lot to create a space that is more appropriate for the feminine sensibility. I don't want to gender type anybody, but I think that we don't slaughter meat in the market, which, by the way, they do in Egypt. If you buy meat in the meat market in Egypt, it walks there on its own 2 feet or 4 feet. In the morning, it is dressed down and slaughtered. It is killed right in the public square, talking about visceral examples of death and violence. Some cultures, parades, we used to have public hangings in this country. And at this point, it's illegal to show people dying. Right. It is just never seen. We don't show our food getting killed. We don't get our...
I see what you're saying, that there is a reason that cutting an all-time high. I don't know if it's more violence, because I have to agree with you. There are cultures that are so much more violent, incredibly so. And I don't think their teenagers are dysfunctional and confused.
Well, some of them are committing suicide, and that's not from violence, that's from pressure to succeed.
I think it's pressure, I think it's boredom.
There's a lot going on with the teenagers in other cultures.
Yeah.
I'm not saying.
You brought up 2 issues, Chris, that I would like to address.
I don't think it's boredom.
No?
You were telling...
I think it is low self-esteem. As, for instance, when bullying takes place, people kill themselves because of cyberbullying and so on. It has to do with this dominant submission tendency that we have built into us as a dominance hierarchy in our species.
I'm going to agree with Bill. I think we're measuring too damn much. I think our schools are measuring kids and testing them too much. I think their Facebook is measuring them too much. Their Instagram is giving them stars and feedback and numbers and followers. And there's a number hanging over them on a daily basis, and you know exactly where they are in the pecking order. I went to high school and nobody told me where I was smart or not. I didn't know whether I had the best grades in class or the worst grades in class, and I'm not sure I cared.
Well, that's good. But Chris, you brought up 2 different issues. You're telling us what we can do as individuals to circumvent violence, which I certainly agree with, but then you brought up the violence between nations. When you have a nation that wants to annihilate your own, what are you supposed to do, or are we supposed to do here in the United States? How are we supposed to address the violence that is at the tipping point for another nation against us? That's an entirely different.
It is entirely different. And I'm just talking about in 2018 going into 2019 and beyond. Finally, for human beings, we're at the technological precipice by which we can go in many different directions. But predominantly there's 2. Tragically over the edge, or more towards a state of nirvana, right? And if we don't start to reorient our minds to reject this hyper-violence, I think that then that direction
Be careful with that
has a much higher chance of going in the negative,
Right.
in the violent direction.
I understand that, yeah.
And so
Okay.
every technology that's ever been created in history has been weaponized, right? And so like some madman out there has decided that like to look at every single technology that emerges, how can that be weaponized? Well, this is not really that big of a deal when all there is gunpowder and a couple of things, you know, around, some metallurgy and stuff. But when you have like nanotechnology and, you know, the stuff that's on the horizon with bioengineering and stuff like that, we're tinkering with a, so we need a change in psychology so rapidly to occur that it's, I guess one could argue that we're ready behind it, because, you know, we need to get away from the violence now before.
So you're assuming that.
Self-understanding.
Well, that's the thing, Bill, is I keep going back to this, is like, I don't know how much more I can do. Like, I don't know how much more I can ponder, I don't know how much more philosophy I can do, I don't know how much more I can improve my ethic, like, literally to, you know, I'm not perfect, but I've put so many hours and so much dedication and time into it.
Yeah.
It's like, and I look outwardly, I look inside and I'm like, yeah, I got a bunch of problems, there's still a bunch of stuff I can work on. But then I look outwardly, what is my environment constantly tuning me? What is the radiant environment that's around me constantly putting in me, right? It's constantly putting sex and violence and all this shit in my brain constantly, non-stop. And it's
You're
like,
the one that chose to watch those videos.
yeah, it's all personal choice. I know there's nothing to do with environment. It's nothing to do with factors. It's not epigenetic. It's not genetic. It's
I mean, you don't see it on the street, do you? I mean, hardly ever.
Okay, so I live in a society with norms, right? And the norms, the norms of society, I have to attenuate myself to a certain extent so I can fit in socially in any regard. I can't make myself so asymmetric that no one wants to be around me. I'm just a weirdo, right? Because if I do that, then I don't have that dynamic that my brain needs, which is a social connection, social, you know, friends.
So you mean like when I asked you to play StarCraft with me?
Yeah, so like to build friends and to have strong relationships and bonds that the human being needs, you need to be a certain amount of symmetry with your society so you fit in with people so they want you in that space, right? If everyone just sees you as a weirdo, okay, you'll be very limited in how many times you can have that. But you need that as a human being. You have to have it. Your brain needs it, or else you're going to suffer in all kinds of ways. And so if you wholesale reject violence as an American citizen, you're going to be very asymmetric. If you don't want to see that football star, you know, take the head off the other football guy, you're not normal, right? If you reject that, and I don't want to see people getting practically killed and brain dead on a football field. Right?
But if it happens, I probably wouldn't see it.
If you know, if
I mean, I don't want it to happen.
Why don't you? I would say that somewhere along the line, you've developed that ethical philosophy that is not a good thing, and you've trained yourself to move away from that.
Well, so like a lot of my friends are into UFC and stuff like that. Because you know, played a lot of ice hockey, so a lot of my friends are into ice hockey, which is physical sport, and so on and so forth. And then a lot of people that are into that physical sport are into a lot of other physical sports, and then they fighting and all this kind of stuff, and they go and watch the stuff, and they pay for you, and I'm excluded from all that. And that's harmful to me. Like, it's psychologically damaging to be excluded from the activities that a majority of my friends.
Do you not see sports actually moving away from gratuitous violence? Because I do. Like, NASCAR has added flaps that stop the cars from wrecking. They don't want to lose any more drivers and bang up crashes.
Right.
Football is doing all kinds of rule changes and all kinds of other changes to sort of stop all this concussionary thing.
And they did so when their viewership started to downturn.
But whatever, for whatever reason, society is putting some pressure on these sports. I mean, that baseball players are wearing more protection now. And every time I go watch a piece of baseball, they got a new piece of armor that they wear, so they don't get beamed with the ball. I mean, almost, you know, hanging out behind a wall to hit the ball back there.
That's not violence, though. I mean, that is another thing that's happening. We're realizing.
You call it not violence when you're throwing a ball at somebody that's fast enough to kill them?
It doesn't have to be a deliberate act of violence for that to happen. And the protection is against it happening.
At the professional level, those pitchers can put a ball inside a circle 10% larger than the ball. If that ball hits the player, it is rarely because of an accidental gust of wind.
Hey, how about that basketball player that kept shattering the goal by dunking?
What about our losing interest in football because it causes CTE?
Yeah, he kept, jerking on the hoop and stuff.
I think they are. I think they are. So my theory says
they
that
kept making it so
this
he
is
could
a
do it
huge
again
problem.
as long as the law
Because
doesn't let
I
him.
think it's a reproductive art.
And there's nothing.
Football is a
wanted
reproductive
him from
performance
tonight,
art.
and nothing to look
It's basically a
Even
way
though
of
he-
saying, hey,
even though he got
I am
by
so
legal trouble.
awesome. You want my genes in the next. It's all this war parading, right? It's the gladiator, it's the fighting, it's the contest, it's the two ducks, knocking antlers until one of them gets to demonstrate that they should be the one to progeny all the next generation. The football players are the same way, and if you think they aren't progening the next generation, spend a minute or two in a locker room. The point is,
I'm agreeing with you so far.
that the fact that they're getting this illness that makes them commit suicide and kill their spouses and all kinds of crazy stuff, I don't know, but it might turn the women off and say, I think I'll go look elsewhere for my man. This does not look like a good bargain. Maybe. I don't know.
When it comes to football players and big bucks. There's more issue there.
I'm sure there is,
There's a
but if
difference
it can't help.
between the expression of opinion and fighting, doing it in a hostile way. There's a difference. Just
What do you think the
expression
difference
of
is,
difference
Phil?
of opinion would be something of interest. But we tend to feel like we have to have loyalty to our group that believes the same. And those who don't agree. That's terrible.
Yeah, no, I agree. I try not to be that way.
Yeah.
I mean, if I see, like, I see both sides, any
Loyalty is disgusting. You should act based on the facts.
Yeah, I know, the facts are even hard to find sometimes.
Loyalty is not necessarily disgusting.
Loyalty
for no good cause might be, just because you're a part of a tribe, a group, or religious organization, just because.
But the cause is the facts.
What?
With the cause or the thing you're causing it, you say that is the facts. If you have a reason to stay one place or another.
Loyalty without suspicion.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, but loyalty means that since I was with this thing in the past, I'm going to be with it in the present. And that's the wrong reason.
If either of you look up Ben Sass,
Yeah.
I'm going to be looking for a lot of feedback.
So I think it's a very important distinction to be made. Sharing and comparing
I
ideas
have seen him.
and trying to work out why
Oh,
we
yeah.
disagree and
So,
how to
give me
come to
feedback
agreement.
on what you're
That
running across,
and,
and if you look at my
I'll look 'em up, yeah.
debate.
Yeah,
is
not that I'm
passionate.
trying to
I'm just gonna
encourage you to
win.
get back into
Yeah.
the swing
And that's-
of things, but
That's this
I really
dominance
really
that's built into us that has to be ethically inhibited.
because I think that's how we're
It's
going
very
to get
difficult.
back again
And so,
to a united United
and
States with a strong
part of the
leader that
reason
is
for
capable of
the
drawing us
anger
together.
is that it goes along
And
with
it's
the
not gonna be some
tribalistic
old
sort of
story.
thing. There's
I
us
don't want anybody
against
my
them
age
kind of
up
thing.
there.
That's
running
built
the
into
country.
us.
It's
And we
like
have
Trump
to
or
work
Hillary or
on
Bernie Sanders. I don't want an old heart. I want somebody in the
inhibiting
40s
that.
or 50s.
And
Somebody
getting so we
who's in
can
contact
really
with
share
younger
and compare
generations
ideas and be
and still
interested.
has
You want me to
some
run?
Do you listen to a podcast?
Appreciate it. If
There
you
was
would,
a
if you would.
I wrote 'em
podcast,
down.
Okay.
it's called Hidden
Thanks.
Brain.
Hey, I'm
Have a
gonna-
good night.
Called what?
Bye.
Hidden Brain, but anyway,
Hidden Brain.
Hidden Brain,
No, I
yeah.
don't.
Give me a squeeze.
Well, anyway, he
It's
talks
just-
about
This is a
Well,
deep dive
this-
on
the
that.
possible
It
genetic
It
links
just wouldn't
to
be acceptable.
tending to have more liberal
That's not
ideas and then
acceptable
having more
behavior in
conservative
almost
ideas.
I see.
Wait,
And it
are
basically,
there conservative ideas? Because I haven't heard one in a long time.
well, you know what I mean,
No,
like
no,
the
no,
right,
really?
the left, whatever.
And
And it basically concludes with the fact that there is probably a very strong genetic link to our political beliefs. And if you really understand that and accept that, then you can kind of allow yourself to forgive someone for feeling a certain way.
You mean like
Kind of
selfishness
be able to-
versus wanting other people to give money or
We
what?
talked about that before here.
Yeah.
There was a very good article that identified
It was
a genetic link, and I believe, I remember the article, it had to do with how we perceive risk.
Yeah,
So I think it does touch on
Yeah, so it
violence.
touches on that, but it definitely,
I would never.
I think
Really
it
whether
allows
we're
people
rational
to,
about risk or whether we're hyper
Unless
like
the purpose
Yeah.
was like
focused on
like,
see
it just
everything
allows
in terms
people
of
to be okay with someone's opinion more so, and not always try to convince someone to see it their way. Like,
when it's appropriate.
my political views, like, I'm not gonna be able to, no matter how many facts I throw at someone, convince another person who is very like conservative and risk adverse and eats at the same restaurant only all the time, never travels. Like that type of person is never going to have the same perspective that I have, and it's just a waste of time to argue and fight about it. But like Bill said, to like come together and try to find a mutual solution. But
making fun of.
yeah.
mutual solutions. Yeah, the country definitely needs to get back to some more of the mutual solutions. I think the center of the country is actually, there.
Yeah.
Part of the challenge is that, well, the election system is not good math, right?
Yeah.
The minority actually wins elections.
Yeah.
That's one, but two.
Well, a minority.
I'll do the benefit of doubt.
The primary process is weird in that it allows somebody who was preferred by like a pretty small minority. It's about 25%, even less than that really. If you look at how many people even show up to primaries, it's only like 8% of the country supports a candidate into the general election.
How old is Megan?
So, it's all the die is already cast. You basically got crazy right or crazy left.
Yeah, I know.
Like before you even get there, and then it's like the middle of the country that has to choose between what and what.
Yeah.
So I think the primary is really different. And it's
Yeah,
not
no
gonna
matter what I do,
I agree with that.
the Pirate Party and the Libertarians are not gonna win. So what do I need to get involved for?
And that was
Well, that's
well,
I think you persuaded a lot of people
But
tonight
no,
with
I
your
don't think you did, but I
opinions.
think a lot of people.
I did?
I think you were particularly effective. I thought you're, I thought you really,
Like persuading
I
them
don't
to do
doubt
what?
the character.
I thought that's a good point. You don't need to get involved.
I don't think he.
You
Why wouldn't
and,
it do his thing?
you and this other fellow behind me, Tim.
I do.
But I think
No reason to vote, no reason to try.
Well, I used to vote. I mean, I think I voted like last
By the way, I
presidential
agree with
election.
those.
I always vote Libertarian.
Yeah.
Just so I know.
I do agree with you. Yeah, I do
Like
agree
they
with
don't
you,
they don't even count the
but I
votes
hate
anymore.
confrontation, so I was like,
For the people I vote for.
in that
Well,
situation,
it was
like,
just
yeah,
so
I agree.
weird because it
But
was such
I
like,
do plan to change the
I mean,
law,
if you're
just
taking pictures
not
of
through
the
their
room,
permission.
100%. If it was
So by
like,
giving people
he
new
did
kinds of
this,
tools.
like,
Yeah, that's a little strange. Unless he was doing it to everyone. So,
Right.
I get it.
If you did it to me, that would be hyper.
Well, you're the moderator, so I forgive that. But yeah.
So this topic is, when I was putting together material for this content, I went through like 5 or 6 different iterations on which way to go with this conversation. And this has opened my mind, this topic opened my mind more than I think any other topic before in all the ones
Wow.
we've done, because I kind of feel as if I see something I've never seen before, and that's that the depth by which violence has penetrated my mind in my life. And I never thought of it like that before.
Yeah.
And so I did like a personal kind of meditation on violence for this, before this, reading all this information, and like, whoa, wait a minute. And I was like, wait a minute, I'm marinated in this shit. I don't even see it anymore. Wait a minute. And like, how do you zoom out of it and actually look at it from that perspective? And I don't know if it's even possible in our culture or in our reality.
Well, I still think we should stab cows.
It's extremely prevalent. Like, it's so much so. There's so many violent thoughts from so many different sources in my brain that it's beyond appropriate. It's completely appropriate.
So you're still going to keep eating meat from cows that were slaughtered, right?
Well, this isn't like, that's not the
But that's violence.
thrust of my idea here.
Oh, so it's just violence against humans.
So
you
like
heading out?
Game of Thrones, right? Have you watched Game of Thrones?
Yeah, I love Game of
Yeah.
Thrones.
I love it too. I love it too, right?
Yeah, I know.
And,
So violent.
and I'm thinking like Red Wedding, and I'm thinking like,
So
you know,
bad.
beheading of Ned Stark. I'm like, what am I doing to myself? Like,
Yeah.
like how
So I feel differently. I don't have a lot of violent inputs into my life that I can think of. I didn't watch Game of Thrones.
Fire Breathing Dragon.
Bill,
Fire
you should
Breathing
start,
Dragon
you should
is
start
cool.
like
It's not
supporting yourself. You
violent.
could be the next Alan Watts or something.
You should play Super Meat Boy.
Put it on
It's
YouTube.
like the most bloody game, but there's actually no violence in it because he doesn't have any skin.
I am.
I mean, he's just like a cartoon character.
I'm gonna try to start
Yeah,
a
so-
YouTube channel.
You know,
But he gets blood on everything.
But do you know
But
about
the,
the humanity?
Our language has so many
podcasts
words
there?
built into it
Yeah, I
that are
do.
hyper violent,
Yeah.
and there's so many words related to
There are
guns, like in our
podcasts
common
down at the
vernacular, and
bottom,
like,
podcast and-
you know,
You need to
let's
get,
go for right, Matt. You're like, I call
just
shotgun.
say all your
What
ideas.
is that? You know, it's like
different segments,
that
like
is just
different
totally
topics.
normal, but it's not normal.
We'll put it to
You're
some
calling
like
shotgun? What the
music,
hell?
put it on
You know what I mean?
YouTube.
It's like
Because
The
you're
next
supposed to
stage
shoot
of
people
the
out the
time.
window.
You know,
Really, seriously.
You know why it's called
I'm
I
gonna
don't believe in
I'm gonna
adding
kill two
music
birds
in
with
it.
one stone.
I don't believe in
No, not.
appealing to the emotions.
What I'm
Well,
saying-
I'd love to have that skill.
What I'm saying
What
is
if I'm
that-
hungry?
I'm saying I'm getting a lot of
You know,
stuff done, right? Why did I
it
just say
gives
that? You
people
know, why would I say
to
kill two
Do
birds?
you think that kill two birds with
Yeah,
one
well,
stone is an example
I understand.
of the kind of violence
It's
you're
a
talking
debatable
about?
It's a
thing.
nano example. No, I don't really think it's.
It is pretty impressive if you can do it, though.
It doesn't come up on the
Pretty
radar.
women and cats.
No.
Seems
No,
to me
not
like
that.
there
No,
are words in
not
our
that.
vocabulary,
Okay,
you
look
just
up Alan
named
Watts,
two,
you'll
like I
learn.
call
Like,
shotgun.
Okay, he
Which
didn't.
in my
he didn't
mind
piss
do
off
not in
wasn't
any
too,
way
like,
trigger
He
thoughts
had
or
recordings. He was a
violence.
professor.
Triggered.
People
No, man,
It'd still be unfunny.
You hanging out the window, boom, boom, boom.
All right,
It
but-
just made it.
all right. If I
guess
show
easier
an
to
image of a
listen to
gun,
for a lot of
okay,
people, like I could have
it
listened to
increases your heart rate, increases your stress level, and increases your testosterone.
But the word
No, I was
call
saying,
shotgun doesn't do that.
it's-
I know
not
this
like
guy.
that.
I know this guy that
If
like
you look up like speeches
plays women
by
like crazy.
Alan
Like,
Watts,
I met him on a
and
plane
other
going over to
people,
Australia. We became fast friends. I thought you guys funny.
He's
He's cool.
professor, so he had
yeah.
recordings.
But I found out he was
done.
admitting to me like
But
he's
later
someone
on,
like
people added
he just
the
goes after women
music
after women
or
after
like
women. Right?
the
He tries to like
image, like the
F the
emotional
world, you
images
know?
or whatever.
F everything.
So he's a player.
Yeah,
Whatever.
major, right?
I'm not
And,
saying
like,
that.
very
I
boasts about
totally
it and all this kind of stuff. You know what he does?
agree with that.
Gets
Or
a
I
girl,
said that I don't
gets
agree
her to
with it,
Vegas with
but
him,
it does
trip,
make it easier
trip,
for
business trip.
a lot of people
He's married,
Yeah,
he's
I
got
know.
kids, all
to
that.
sit through and
Takes him to
listen
Vegas
to,
on a business
you
trip.
know, otherwise
Takes
they
him
get
shooting
their
at a
mind
shooting
starts to
range.
wander or
Well,
whatever.
Takes him to
this
the hotel.
stuff-
Said 100%.
I think it's going
takes
to
women to the
appeal
shooting
more
range?
to
Yes.
a
Wow,
small
It's
Might have to try that.
It's his
Like
angle, so it's in Vegas. So
college
it's got the
professors
mystique.
and,
You know, it's got the
and,
mystique of Vegas. All right. It takes them
people
out
who
shooting
do a
a
lot
gun.
of
They feel
thinking
power. They
as
feel the power.
opposed to
Look, so if they never tried to
people
shoot
are
before, it's like.
actively
Practically.
involved in all sorts of
And then you know dinner or whatever, and
activities
then
and so
back to
forth,
hotel.
and
This
don't
is
think
100%.
about
Works every
such
time.
things, and
It's like
the
think about it.
idea
Why?
is if the
Why
Because
would
it's
that
fun
work?
to shoot guns.
it will spread out in that
Because
way.
you feel power.
So I'm not trying
And it's
to
fun.
appeal to
It's
the
hyper-violence.
masses,
It's
so
that
to
it's
speak.
that bridge between.
You're right. You're shooting at a target. It's not violent.
It's
Yes,
that bridge
of
between
course
sex
I
and
do.
violence.
Yeah.
Well, I'm at a shooting range, which I don't do that often.
But
But
I do
I'm not
have
thinking about
podcasts
shooting a
on
person.
there
It's
where
aiming.
So this violence is used. then
Does the
to-
target that you shoot at have a picture
I
of a
even
person
have
on it?
the
Not a very good
100%,
picture.
100%.
the humanity.
Yeah.
It's like a stick figure.
No, so Ben,
Oh,
what
I
happens is
haven't
that
seen
the
that. I
coupling
need to
of
watch
violence
that.
with other
You
activities,
listen
right?
to
The
it.
coupling of violence
Okay.
is permeates
Now, is
through
that on
everything.
YouTube?
It's a leverage.
No, it's
a
not
sell
on
point.
YouTube, but it's on the website.
Right, so
Well, you
that's
need
why I
to
said
put it
that
on
coupling
YouTube.
political
Yeah, I
ideology
know,
with
Because
with
that's
violence.
what
So,
you-
so here's a
That's
pop
what,
quiz. If I go to an average
That's
shooting
what makes
range
it searchable.
and I ask
Yeah.
for the political affiliation of
Oh.
everybody in that range, what do you figure I'll
So,
come away with? 50-50?
No. No, almost certainly majority Republican, of course. I mean,
So
that's,
see down at the
So this
bottom.
notion
Yeah,
that,
I know
that
the
there's no
website.
difference,
Oh, do
I
you?
think
Yeah,
is
I've been on it
based
before.
on
So
a
podcast.
failure
and
to appreciate
then,
the meaning of the word the word fact. Just a
But
thought.
Ben,
humanity
the whole entire thing is
Who's
just
your
like,
website?
of the political theater is
Oh,
the
okay.
categorization, like
so-
if I called myself a liberal and was
Yeah, I love that.
going to the rallies,
Have you seen this?
doing all the stuff, supporting all those candidates, all that kind of stuff, I would almost certainly adopt a certain ideology that was consistent with that group. Same with any group.
By and large, one of the values, I think, that if you're progressive,
Oh my goodness.
you might well
That's Bill Raymond.
Yes.
identify is that peaceful protests are probably have really been a powerful tool and this is by experience, right? For the left, peaceful protests have been a path to success. I don't know that the right wing in this country has ever accomplished anything by peaceful means. I've challenged history to show one thing that has been accomplished, so that right wingers can point to and say, "Oh yeah, we did some peaceful protesting, and that's how."
Right.
So this was accomplished.
I want to see that though.
If you go from if you take that right and left perspective, and you roll that back through history enough times, there's plenty of issues that were championed by the right that have reversed over time and are now championed by the left and vice versa.
Like which one? By Republicans and Democrats, yes. But by the right and the left? No. By progressives
Democrat,
and
Republican,
conservatives?
that's as far as I can really go mentally. I don't know
I don't know.
the true right, the true left.
Lincoln was anti-slavery. The Republican Party of today
I heard he was pushed into it and he didn't like
is the party of racism. I'm not saying all Republicans are racist. I am saying that all racists, largely, almost all racists, are Republicans.
I would challenge that in a heartbeat.
Because
is racism just a general tool of the system? It's another derivative of the violence.
Can you name one racist?
David Duke.
Okay, do you know a racist though?
Personally.
Yeah. The left tends to throw the word racist around, but I don't know if everyone I know on the left doesn't know one racist person. So, do you know a racist person? Because I don't.
I live with one. My roommate's racist.
What makes him a racist?
The fact that he thinks that he doesn't like black people.
All black people?
How about
in general, he uses the N-word to refer to them. Yeah.
How about people who live in the ghetto? He's like,
is it 100% he doesn't have one healthy relationship with a black person?
I've never seen it.
What about any other ethnic groups? Hispanics, Asians? Does he get along with anyone else? Is it just white people? Assuming that he's white.
He is, in fact, one of these people that doesn't make a lot of friends. But
the definition of racism is when you think that your race is superior to all other races.
So it's when you think any race is superior to any other race.
So when you think that one race is superior to all other races, so what happens?
Racism is when you believe that at least one race other than your own is inferior to yours.
It's got nothing to do with your own race.
So if a white person can say that, hey, Japanese are fine, but I don't like Mexicans, to say that is somehow not racism, I reject that definition.
Okay, people, let's all of us agree we'll really start working toward our HUP. Again, we ask what you're talking about.
Well, there's way too much high
all
sound for
members
that.
of each race.
Does this ever end? Or does it go on? It's almost. The sound you have going on in the background makes it hard to hear what you're saying.
I think it sounded better when I played it on regular speakers.
Oh my goodness.
Almost over.
Yeah. So it's prejudice, discrimination.
I read ahead.
Directed against
awesome.
someone of a different race based on the belief that one's own race is superior.
It ends musically.
Some other race.
Oh, does okay.
Well, I don't know.
Is superior to another race or races.
Right.
So if you, but what I'm saying is that
another race. All you have to do is look down on one other race.
But you would have to look down at 100%.
No, that's not what that said.
No, this is the average.
Yeah.
It just said another race.
All of that race.
No, another race, not all other races.
No, that race. Meaning all African Americans.
What are you trying to say? That if
Even
you look
Elon
down
Musk?
on a particular race, you're not a racist?
No, I'm saying that if you look down on one, if you have a race.
If you only look down on one race, that you're not a racist.
You're not, I haven't said multiple races. the same race, right? Talking about one race. So your roommate is white. If he has, what I think happens more often is racial prejudice or discrimination against certain people of a race, not the whole entire race. Odds are he doesn't have a problem with every single black person. He probably is wrongfully discriminating against a handful of African Americans. That is, by definition, is racial discrimination, not racism.
Yeah,
racism is the whole race.
My grandpa wasn't racist against blacks, and he said there's something.